For centuries, vampires have existed beyond the reach of ordinary people, silently watching from the darkness. To most of the world, they are nothing more than myths and legends, stories told to frighten children. But behind the veil of normal society, a secret war rages on. A war fought in abandoned streets, dark alleys, and moonlit nights where only one side can survive. In this world, humans are not always the hunters. Sometimes, they are the prey. Our story follows Han Se-gun, an ordinary young man whose life changes forever in a single horrifying night. One moment he is living a normal life, surrounded by the people he loves. The next, everything is taken from him in a brutal act of violence carried out by creatures he never believed could exist. The massacre leaves him with nothing but pain, anger, and an overwhelming desire for revenge. While most people would break under such tragedy, Se-gun chooses a different path. Instead of running from the darkness, he decides to step into it. Driven by hatred and the need for justice, he enters a world hidden from ordinary eyes, a world filled with vampires, hunters, monsters, and deadly secrets. Along the way, he encounters powerful allies and terrifying enemies, each of whom will shape the person he becomes. But revenge is never simple. As Se-gun grows stronger and learns more about the supernatural world around him, he begins to realize that the line between hero and monster is far thinner than he once believed. Every battle pushes him closer to his goal, but it also forces him to confront difficult truths about humanity, power, and the cost of vengeance. Will he succeed in destroying the creatures responsible for his suffering, or will his obsession with revenge transform him into something just as dangerous as the monsters he hunts? Listen, prepare yourself for a journey into a world where the moon illuminates not beauty, but bloodshed. A world where every shadow may hide a predator, and every choice carries a deadly price. Well, the summary of the story had already been told, so let me remind everyone that before diving in, don't forget to like and subscribe, while also sharing your thoughts in the comments, because even at the end of the world, engagement still matters. Now let's start from the very beginning in detail. Story kicks off under the moonless night. On that dark and silent night, the world's strongest hunter, Sylvester, arrived. Stepping out of his car, he gazed toward the base of the mountain, sensing that something was terribly wrong. Two men sit near a burning barrel inside an industrial area. One of them understands that the other is saying they brought in a new illegal drug, and learns that its name is Psychedelic Moon. The other man explains that the people who demanded illegal entry gave it to them instead of money, which leaves the listener confused. And one of the men asks if there are any more guests coming. A man steps forward and stops Sylvester, asking where he is from and then politely asking him to show his invitation. Sylvester responds by raising a gun close to the man's face, and indicating if this is what he means. In the next moment, he fired a bullet without any hesitation. Under the moonlight, Sylvester confirms that this is what he meant. Inside a club filled with red and blue lights, music equipment, and a wide floor are shown as people gather around tables. A vampire's mouth twists into a sharp grin as his fangs show, and nearby a woman with headphones reacts, calling out in alarm. The vampire moves through the crowd and complains that they are killing the mood, then asks if there is nothing more exciting. He tells them to just pick something fun and play it hard, questioning why it is so difficult. He steps forward across the floor, followed by the woman reacting as the vampire states that if even that is difficult, there is no reason for them to endure hunger. The gate bursts open and a body collapses nearby. Someone reacts in shock and points out to look at their faces. Vampires with distorted expressions stand among the chaos. Sylvester stands framed in a doorway and remarks that it looks like they had some fun. For vampires, humans are nothing but prey, or toys. However, there were creatures that even such vampires feared, and we call them vampire hunters. One vampire demands to know who he is. Another vampire realizes that the man did not get an invitation as he rushes forward, but is struck down in an instant. Sylvester steps in calmly, expressing regret and saying it makes him sad. He states that he understands. They are desperately trying to find traces of their parent, Jokyo. He continues that for the renowned Jokyo faction to fall so low as to conspire with a third-rate criminal gang is shameful. He asks what the deceased Jokyo would say if they saw this. Holding his weapon near his face, he wonders if they would not shed tears they had never shed before. A vampire clenches his jaw as recognition dawns. He states that it is him. Sylvester meets their gaze without reaction. The vampire realizes his identity and recalls the man as a priest expelled from the Vatican, the true demon hunter, Sylvester. The vampire declares that he will adorn the night with Sylvester's blood. Sylvester calmly responds that their guest service is quite terrible. In a blur of motion, bodies are flung aside as Sylvester advances through the hall. A vampire sneers and mocks him, asking if it is because he has no parents. In the beginning, the Lord made Adam from soil, and from Adam's bone made Eve. Death as the holy ceremony of returning to Eden. Sylvester stands amid flying bodies, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Sylvester stands amid the wreckage and states that he does not think there is any information he needs from these vampires. Even the thought of trying to kill him shows that the vampire is the most useless mongrel among mongrels. The vampire snaps back angrily, shouting for him to shut up as he lunges forward. Sylvester meets the charge head-on. The vampire twists his body midair and strikes again, claws flashing. Sylvester counters and knocks him aside, sending him crashing across the floor. The vampire's body slams down hard, debris scattering around him. Sylvester looks down at the fallen opponent and remarks that he can transform. The vampire launches another attack, swinging wildly. Sylvester cuts through the assault and strikes him cleanly, blood spraying as the blow lands. The vampire is sent flying once more and smashes into the ground. As dust settles around the broken floor, a vampire hunter complains and asks if Sylvester could not have held back a little. Bodies lie scattered across the bloodstained floor as Sylvester faces the hunter kneeling beside a fallen vampire. The hunter named as Youngjun warns that if Sylvester chops them up like this, there will not be much blood left to collect. Sylvester asks where Deokyeon is. Youngjun answers that he is filling in for him today. He then adds that it was true. The Jokyo faction had a connection with the Sangdong gang. He continues that having a hideout in a place like this makes it a good spawning sanctuary where countless lives can be harvested. Sylvester told him to stop whining and get back to work. The vampire's red eye sharpens as he reacts. Sylvester realizes something and notes that he finally found him. He turns and advances, weapon raised. He fires, and repeated shots strike the vampire's body, bursting blood as the impacts land. The vampire is blasted backward through the air, spinning violently as blood trails behind him. Outside of the industrial yard, a violent shock erupts through the yard as the vampire crashes through the structure, tearing it apart in a burst of force. The vampire sprints forward at high speed, blood streaking from its wounds as it flees. Jungjun notes that it ran very fast, and Sylvester asks if he can leave the cleanup to Jungjun. Jungjun suggests leaving the injured one alone since it will probably die soon. Anyway, Sylvester turns back coldly and warns that if Jungjun says something like that one more time, he will die by Sylvester's hand very soon. Jungjun laughs and says Sylvester's jokes are quite extreme, but Sylvester asks if it sounds like a joke. Youngjun agrees to clean up to the best of his ability and tells Sylvester to leave it to him. Later, Youngjun mutters to himself about whether he should really be cleaning up. Sylvester stands alone by the water under the moonlit sky, breathing out slowly and thinking that things are getting complicated, realizing that the target has already lost his reason and is becoming a feral. Under the full moon, Sylvester walks away through the empty streets. Elsewhere, a group of bikers races through a tunnel at high speed as police cars chase them with sirens blaring. A police officer shouts at the bikers to slow down if they do not want to die. One of the bikers laughs loudly and tells them to try to kill them then. A biker leans forward on a motorcycle speeding through the rain, the headlight blazing. Tonight, someone shall become a sacrifice to the moonlit night. For this biker it was a life without any particular worries. A detached house with a garden, a father who runs a business and a mother who is a housewife, a model student older brother, and even a golden retriever named Joan of Arc. A bright flash cuts the scene. Bikers race through a tunnel at high speed, police cars chasing behind them. Compared to them, this biker had nothing he particularly wanted to do, and his grades were average. That was why. He always wanted to escape from his ordinary daily life. A woman riding on the back of a motorcycle asks why that guy keeps chasing them and how they are supposed to lose him. She shouts at a man named as Jung Young Jin, telling him not to say he cannot shake him off, complains about what he did by flipping him off and cursing him, and snaps at him to take it seriously. Jin yells for her to just stay still. Jin remains silent. The biker grips the handle tightly, and it becomes clear that because he broke the rules, he only needs to stick to the set path. The motorcycles speed down the road together. Jin shouts at Han Segeon, asking what he is doing and where he is going. Han Segeon's bike hits the edge and launches upward. The two riders watching cry out in shock. Han Segeon soars through the air. He continues riding at high speed. A rider calls out, asking if Han Segeon is running away by himself. Back then, for Han Segeon, riding was the only escape from a life soaked in inertia. Han Segeon arrives at a quiet place and walks forward alone. He wonders if Joan of Arc is quiet today. He goes up the stairs and checks the door, thinking she might be sleeping. He calls out that he is home. As he opens the door, he suddenly notices a strange smell. He realizes it is blood. In the dark entryway where the lights are out, a stench like rotting mackerel fills the air. He understands that clearly someone has entered their house. Holding a weapon, he calls out for his mom, his dad, and his brother. He asks if anyone is there. A large shadow looms behind him. The figure suddenly attacks, and Han Segeon swings his weapon upward while calling out Joan of Arc. A massive creature with bared teeth presses down on him. Han Segeon groans as he struggles and is thrown aside. He forces himself back up, gripping the weapon with both hands. The creature lunges again. Han Segeon wonders if that really is Joan of Arc. The sounds of repeated impacts fill the space. He realizes this cannot be happening, and fears that Joan of Arc might be what he thinks, and then knocks the creature down. Joan of Arc's image flashes in his mind. His attention snaps to the floor, where bodies lie motionless. He cries out in pain and collapses, choking and gagging, then starts vomiting just by the smell. He thinks of Joan of Arc and his parents, unable to understand what happened to their house. The sound of movement draws his attention upward, and he realizes it is still inside the house, on the second floor. Seeing a fallen baton, he doubts it will be enough, and remembers there was a shotgun kept in the study. He drags himself there and finds his brother badly injured. Standing before him, he realizes his brother was hit as well. Han Segeon apologizes weakly, struggling to speak. He tells his brother that if only he had come a little earlier, this might not have happened. Han Segeon grips the shotgun, shaken but resolute, and decides he will kill them all. He checks the weapon and notices there is still warmth left. He concludes that his brother used the gun while he fought. He wonders why the culprit did not take the gun. Holding the shotgun, he thinks that if it comes to this, they might believe he cannot kill them. He moves toward the stairs, and a thought follows that he should have realized it then. He goes down while gripping the gun. He thinks that, however, for his thoughts to reach that conclusion rationally is honestly close to impossible, because a bloodied foot steps onto the floor. He raises the shotgun as a sound rings out. He thinks that, in the first place, that thing was in existence outside of common sense. He feels no feelings or emotions bubbling up, and it feels like his mind comes to a complete halt. He gives an example of seeing a favorite celebrity in real life for the first time. Another example follows about hearing a lame joke, or when you see a beautiful landscape and right now, the figure stands at the top of the stairs facing him. Han Se-gyeon looks up, his face tense. He braces himself on the stairs and raises the shotgun. A sudden impact follows as the vampire rushes at him. The shotgun is knocked away as a white-furred vampire lunges forward with its mouth open. Han Se-gyeon is sent flying backward and crashes hard onto the floor, blood spreading beneath him. His hand scrapes against the ground as he struggles to move, and he thinks his shoulder feels like it popped out. The creature looms upright, towering over him as saliva drips from its mouth. He thinks that he could have run away or called the police, or asked the people around for help, but when the situation actually struck, he could not think of doing any of that. Han Se-gyeon sits slumped against the wall, the shotgun resting loosely in his hands as blood pools beneath him. He does not know why he was like that, but back then, only one thought filled his mind: to kill that thing. The vampire lunges again, its glowing eyes fixed on him. Han Se-gyeon forces his body to move and fires. The blast erupts, sending sparks and shock through the air as the recoil twists his body. The vampire cuts his hand as the weapon flies from Han Se-gyeon's hands. His eyes widen as he hits the ground, breath knocked out of him. The vampire descends, towering over his fallen form, its limbs stretching unnaturally as it closes in. The vampire grabs him by the head and lifts him off the ground. His body hangs limply as blood drips between them. He realizes that he could not even take revenge properly. His thoughts list his dad, his mom, his brother, and Joan of Arc. The vampire approaches again, its glowing eyes fixed on him. He feels sorry for being this much weak. A gunshot rings out. The vampire's hand is struck, bursting apart as its body is thrown backward. It crashes down, blood spraying across the floor. The vampire convulses, struggling to rise again. A man steps forward saying the vampire finally went and committed it. He raises his gun and fires again. The vampire is struck and thrown backward. The vampire watches the man with cold-blooded eyes. The man himself, Sylvester, cuts the vampire and finishes him off colding, saying that if Han Se-gyeon was going to die, he should have gone alone quietly. Several bodies lie scattered on the ground as Sylvester stands among them holding a weapon, while Han Se-gyeon remains motionless. Sylvester walks toward Han Se-gyeon, who lies wounded on the floor. It is said that there is no one righteous, not even one, and that all people on earth are sinners. Sylvester stands over Han Se-gyeon and tells him to resent him. Sylvester's eyes are shown in silence, followed by a gun lying on the ground near Han Se-gyeon's hand. Han Se-gyeon struggling and bloodied, as Sylvester asks to let him ask one thing and questions whether the gun belongs to him. Sylvester remains silent as Han Se-gyeon lies bleeding on the floor. It is stated that Han Se-gyeon is too good to be killed outright, and that his life until now had been one without any particular worries, whereas after some time a voice urgently calls out for a student from outside a building. Han Se-gyeon lies near a shotgun on the floor as the word student is shouted again. It is stated that maybe that was the reason, that Sylvester wanted to deviate just as much as others were ordinary. An officer kneels beside Han Se-gyeon and urgently asks if he is okay and if he can hear. He shouts that there is a survivor and calls for personnel to be sent over. Han Se-gyeon weakly calls out for his mother and father. He lies flat on the ground and murmured about his brother. People gather around him, and it is stated that his wish came true. On a TV, reports arrive that a week ago, there was an incident that caused quite a stir among the public. The news anchor reports on a mysterious case involving the death of an entire family, stating that the survivor possesses a shotgun. Another report asks whether the family was bitten by their pet dog, confirms that this is correct, and questions whether they really died from the dog's bite. The news anchor says that the production team said the survivor was holding a shotgun at the time of the incident. A blood-stained shotgun on the floor is shown as the reporter tells again that the survivor possesses a shotgun. He explains that attention is being paid to the fact that the survivor actually fired that gun. A student states that he knows the survivor's brother is pretty smart, suggests it could have been done out of jealousy, and Jin adds that the victim was known for riding a bike, but he was not a thug, and that there was something about him that felt off. A photographer raises a camera and takes pictures. Han Se-gyeon stands facing forward, thinking that he has never seen so many faces in his entire life. The reporters surround him as people ask what happened and urge him to say something. He thinks they demand an explanation, as if they entrusted something to him, and accuse him of shooting them for a reason, asking why he wanted to kill his family like that. It feels like they are trying to find something hidden. A reporter pleads for him to say something as a recorder is held out toward him. A sudden sense of shock is shown as grotesque blood-covered vampire that killed his entire family appears in his thought. Han Se-gyeon is asked what is wrong and whether this is what Han Se-gyeon wanted, saying that even while his family was being murdered, he was peacefully riding his bike. He thinks he deserves to be angry. Han Se-gyeon says no, then shouts that he said no. He runs down the street, and it is stated that he ran away from something he does not even know. He cannot remember anything clearly, and that it might also be because he does not want to remember. Han Se-gyeon clenches his fist and cries while thinking that he did not want to believe that what he got himself into was real. When he finally woke up, the monster's body had already disappeared without a trace, and that the arm that was cut off was still intact. As he looks at his blood-stained hand, everything he went through that day was something that never truly existed, and that he forgot everything. His family's body appears in his thoughts. followed by the image of that monster, then another man. Therefore Han Segion, he had no choice but to leave the house. It is something other people would not believe, and that even so, he could not lock himself inside the house. Han Segion walks alone through a city street at night while people pass by around him. He thinks that the most painful memory he ever had was in that place and he has nowhere to go. Han Segion stands near his motorcycle thinking that there is nowhere for him to go, either inside or outside. He rides the motorcycle through the night. Han Segion stops and looks up, reacting in silence. Sylvester stands nearby as he thinks that this man was definitely someone. Han Segion suddenly rushes forward toward him. He turns and asks whether the man was at his house that night. Han Segion points at Sylvester and says that he was at their house, insisting that it was him. Han Segion raises his voice and says that it was the day the monster came. Sylvester tells him to be quiet and says that Han Segion goes around causing trouble for everyone, adding that he was told not to shout in the middle of the night. Han Segion asks who Sylvester is and what the monster was. Sylvester dismisses it and tells Han Segion to show how good his imagination is. Han Segion asks whether Sylvester is an exorcist. Sylvester replies that it is close enough. Han Segion asks what the monster he saw was, and then asks whether it was a vampire. Sylvester answers that it is correct. Han Segion reacts in shock. Sylvester says that now that it has come to this, he will get straight to the point and asks whether Han Segion drank vampire blood. Han Segion says that some of the monster's blood got on him when he shot it, and wonders if that means he turned into a vampire. Sylvester says it is possible if he did drink its blood. Han Segion looks at his arm and says that means this arm. Sylvester says no, and states that he was the one who stuck it back. Han Segion asks what Sylvester means by that nonsense, and Sylvester questions whether what he saw makes sense. Han Segion falls silent, then asks if there are many vampires out there. Sylvester says that whether there are or not is none of Han Segion's business, and tells him what he needs to do now is return to his normal life. Han Segion looks at him and asks whether Sylvester really thinks that is possible, saying that he lost everything, and asking how he is supposed to return to his normal life. Sylvester grabs Han Segion. Sylvester looks down at him and says that Han Segion thinks he is something special, then tells him to stop whining and says that he is not the only unfortunate one. Han Segion pauses, and quietly says, then. He asks what Sylvester wants him to do. Han Segion says that he saw the monster, and that it killed his family he saw with his own 2 eyes. Han Segion steps forward and asks how he is supposed to live without forgetting that, then says it is impossible, and that he cannot do it. He cries and declares that he will get rid of all of them, even if it kills him. Sylvester stands in front of him, watching in silence. Sylvester's eyes are shown as he listens. The moon hangs in the night sky as Sylvester calls Han Segion an annoying brat. Inside a cafe, people sit and talk as the scene shifts. Jungjun greets Sylvester and says that he is here. Sylvester responds that he told him not to call him by that name. A woman says that Han Segion is here too and remarks that he is the kid who survived back then. Sylvester asks what happened to what they talked about. Jungjun tells that it seems the person they are looking for left Korea. Sylvester sits down and asks whether they managed to do nothing but track him and lose him again, then trails off. Jungjun questions why that guy was brought there and says he looks too flimsy to be thrown in right now. Sylvester warns that the moment someone lets their guard down, a vampire could break their bones and sever their muscles. Segion then asks how they can fight against those guys. Sylvester explains that this is called psychedelic moon, and that in order to fight vampires, humans must consume it. If it is taken, the pain subsides, and the user becomes able to exert many times their normal strength. However, the more it is used, the more the body breaks down, and relying on this power leads to dying alone, since it is made of vampire blood. If things go even slightly wrong, the user could end up becoming the same as them. Sylvester asks if Segion still wants to take revenge after hearing that, and says they are being told this now. He warned that if Segion steps into the darkness of the night, he will never be able to return to reality. Segion repeats that not being able to return to reality applies to him already. He grips Sylvester's hand and says he already cannot return. Sylvester demands to know what Segion is doing and asks who told him to take it now. Segion pushes forward, and Sylvester reacts to the sudden movement. Song Deok-yeon watches and remarks that Segion is absurd but has some fire in him. Song Deok-yeon introduces himself as a vampire hunter, and Sylvester tells him that he will leave Segion to him, instructing Song Deok-yeon to bring Segion to a point where he will not die easily. Song Deok-yeon responds that there is no other choice and accepts the task. Song Deok-yeon places a hand on Segion's head and welcomes him to the world of the Mad Moon. Sylvester orders the women present there named as Song Hui to immediately search for a boat to Mexico. Segion reacts in confusion and asks if Song Deok-yeon is going abroad, then asks who will train him. Outside, Sylvester dismisses it as ridiculous and questions whether Segion can even be made useful. Song Deok-yeon answers that he will have to try hard, and Sylvester says he will repeat welcome again. He welcomes Han Se-gun to the world of the Mad Moon. 1 year later, at the Benia Club, several black cars are parked along the roadside. A car door opens, and a man named as Cheon Young-hoo, the Sangdong gang deputy boss, steps out. Someone calls out saying that Hyung-nim is here. A group of men line up on both sides as Cheon Young-hoo walks forward. Cheon Young-hoo dismisses being called Hyung-nim and tells them to call him Sunbae now, adding that they are businessmen who should do proper business. The other man agrees and says he is right. Young-hoo asks why he was called, and the man replies that his sunbae has been very busy lately. The man hesitates and says it is about something. Inside the venue, several people lie on the floor while one person stands in the center. A man wearing a cap stands with his back turned. Young-hoo asks if he was called because of this, and the man nervously confirms. Young-hoo angrily tells him to manage the spots properly. The man apologizes and corrects himself, calling him Sunbae. Young-hoo questions if that is the one who destroyed their hideout. The cap-wearing man stands alone in the center of the venue while several people lie on the floor around him. Young-hoo observes him and notes that he was told this cap-wearing guy named Sigun was a foreigner, then remarks that Sigun looks very young. Young-hoo insults Sigun and asks if he has been messing around. Sigun reacts with confusion. Young-hoo says it is the first time in his life seeing a thug like Sigun, and adds that if Sigun wants something in a free, this is a democratic nation, so he should just say it. Young-hoo asks what Sigun plans to do now, and states that they need to open for business soon. Sigun questions being called a thug, and says he is acting because they are not giving him the item, even though he already paid the down payment. Young-hoo repeats the word thing and asks if Sigun did not know. Sigun explains that Young-hoo's lackeys took 5 million won in cash, and that as their officer, Young-hoo should know. Sigun adds that this sounds like a thuggish organization. Young-hoo becomes irritated and demands to know what Sigun is talking about. The man hesitates, and Sigun explains that it involves a Dragunov, a Tokarev, and an AK-47. Young-hoo reacts in disbelief, and asks if Sigun wants all of that for just 5 million. Then questions how much Sigun thinks each item costs. Young-hoo asks if Sigun is saying this while knowing everything. Sigun asks what Young-hoo means by knowing what. Sigun states that the Sangdong gang brings in Russian and Chinese weapons and distributes them, and adds that this is why they charge several times the original price. Young-hoo falls silent. He then scoffs and says there is no reason to talk with someone like this, then tells his men to report Sigun to the police and move on. Sigun threatens if that will really be fine. He remarks that he could tell the authorities that the Sangdong gang, which claims to sell knives and guns, is now dealing drugs as well. Young-hoo suddenly shouts at his men, demanding to know what they are doing. He turns back with a furious expression and orders them to slice up Sigun immediately. Sigun calmly raises his hand. One of the men rushes in and swings his weapon, but Sigun steps in and strikes him head-on, stopping the attack and knocking him back. Sigun lowers his head slightly and steps into the incoming attack. One man swings his weapon downward, but Sigun slips inside the strike and drives his body forward. Sigun strikes again in one continuous motion, lifting the man off his feet and slamming him down. The second man rushes in, but Sigun closes the distance and hits him head-on, dropping him as well. Young-hoo reacts in shock, realizing that Sigun took down both men by himself. Sigun straightens up while the two men lie motionless on the floor. He turns and begins walking away at a calm pace. Young-hoo steps forward and asks what Sigun wants. Sigun stops in front of him and states that he wants a Dragunov, a Tokarev, and an AK-47, adding that he has already paid. Young-hoo reluctantly says that they cannot fulfill the deal right now, and explains that it is not as easy as always carrying the guns they sell. He demands that Sigun at least tell him where and when the deal will happen. Sigun agrees and sets the time for tomorrow at 8 p.m. He specifies the location as the Yoido Hyungshin Securities parking lot. Sigun turns his back and leaves. Young-hoo curses under his breath and calls him bloody bastard. The man asks if Young-hoo is alright and calls him Sunbae. Young-hoo snaps back that it is Hyungnim, not Sunbae. The man quickly corrects himself and answers. Young-hoo says it cannot be helped and orders his men to tell those guys to come. The scene shifts outside a brick warehouse at sunset. Inside, blood packs are lined up on a machine, and a dealer who trades vampire blood in Korea named as Old Man Jew comments that lately they have been really bad. He dismisses them as all a bunch of crap. He explains that most of the blood brought in has VAT levels below 20. Song Deok-yeon states that most of the guys running things around here are from the Sangdong gang. He questions how the levels could be that low, even if they are just mutts, and asks whether the machine was tampered with. The old man laughs it off and says that if it is not believable, they can go somewhere else, adding that the machine is not an ordinary one. Songdik says he did not actually mean that, and asks why the old man has to be so serious. The old man tells him to stop babbling and just take the money. The old man brings up Youngjun and says that his entire family got killed by vampires, then asks if there has been any contact with him since. Songdek responds that there is no reason to talk about him and turns away, but mocks that Youngjun is probably running around excitedly with a knife and says he should just get turned into a vampire. He says he is leaving, and calls Old Man Jew an old man. The old man mutters that the man is never honest. Outside the warehouse, Songdek walks away. He suddenly reacts with a brief sound and questions if he is only coming back now. Songdek tells Segun not to say that he went somewhere and got into another fight again, and Segun denies it, saying not at all. Songdek asks why Segun cannot look him in the eyes. Segun brings up catching vampires and says he cannot even begin to talk about that. With Songdeek says Segun still lacks skill and should focus only on training without thinking about anything else. He adds that he understands Segun's body is itching now that he has gotten better, but going around causing trouble with shady people is not something that will happen. Segun tells there is no need to worry. Songdeok agrees to leave it there. Segun pauses and asks what should be done if there is a need to kill a person. Songdeok answers that the choice is to kill, explaining that if one starts from the assumption that a person must be killed, then the decision is obvious. Even though there can be arguments about situations where killing is truly necessary, Sigun responds that he understands. Songdaek says he was right when he thought Sigun was thinking about something else, then grabs Sigun and suggests going to the training gym and getting in the ring since it has been a while. Sigun reacts in shock and shouts no. A city skyline is shown at night. Several men stand together in a dark interior, and one of them questions whether they are really being asked to step forward just to catch one kid. Another man tells him to calm down and says that is not how he should think, adding that although they became vampires, still one must be loyal to Hyungnims. Other man replies that loyalty does not exist and asks if he remembers 1 year ago, when their people were entertaining the junkie party and all got beaten up, and how the responsibility was placed on them just because they were the same vampires. He adds that even today they are still whining about catching one little punk. A sudden impact follows as something is thrown with force. The clash escalates as bodies are smashed and sent flying. A powerful burst erupts as someone is struck head-on. One reacts saying that all the guys outside were already dealt with, and adds that even though it has not been long since they became vampires, they were still valuable assets. Both vampires stand together, and one asks if he is done having fun with their little lump of blood. He asks what they should do since they cannot give what was asked for. Sigun replies that there was no expectation of getting it anyway. Both vampires react in shock. Sigun stands holding a sword and says that nothing else can be expected from bullies. He adds that if he plucks out their canines and sells them, that should be good business. In past while training, Songdeok mentions that the vampire who killed the family is most likely belonged to the Sangdong gang. Sigun reacts by questioning the Sangdong gang. Sigun asks whether this means vampires are working together with gangsters. The fight resumes as Sigun charges forward and strikes Songdeok, forcing him back. Sigun follows up by twisting his body and delivering another heavy blow. Songdeok is sent flying as Sigun's attack lands cleanly. Sigun closes in again and drives a powerful strike into Songdeok's body. Songdeok staggers as Sigun continues pressing the attack. He remarks that Sigun's strength is impressive. He then asks if Sigun knows why Sylvester is called the Hunter of True Vampires. Sigun questions, why bringing up that now? Songdeok mentions that Sylvester killed the true vampire known as Jokyo. Sigun asks about what that means. He attacks while blocking the attack. Songdeok tells that the true vampires are those who are extremely powerful beings, with an VT that usually exceeds hundreds of thousands. They regenerate faster that sunlight can destroy them, so they can operate in day 2. Songdeok tells that among those true vampires, the Jokyo clan led by a vampire named Jokyo was a clan that was famous among even vampire forces. Sigun attacks and Songdeok dodges that attack. He then counterattack with his kick, sending Sigun flying backward. He states that after Jokyo was killed by Sylvester, the clan disintegrated instantly. Sigun, lying on the ground, asks if this means the surviving members of the Jokyo clan joined forces with the Sangdong gang. Songdeok confirms that they are searching for traces of Jokyo. Sigun asks what is meant by traces. Songdeok explains that they want to inherit Jokyo's power and reclaim their former glory. The two continue fighting inside the ring. As the explanation continues, Sigun suddenly realizes something and reacts in shock. Songdeok slams Sigun down with force, making him cough in pain. He states that even if the Jokyo clan is no longer what it used to be, the Esquire, the second in command, or say the successor is still alive, Songdeok warns Sigun not to act recklessly, and says that if Sigun becomes their target, every second will turn into living hell. Whereas in present, a vampire leaps forward with claws extended towards Sigun as he sits on a motorcycle. The vampire who is boss of them standing beside a car asks if help is needed. The vampire refuses and says he will handle it alone. He tells the boss to just stay put. The boss reacts, asking if he is giving orders now. The vampire turns his head, baring his teeth, and repeats that the boss should stay put for a bit. The motorcycle's headlight flares as Sigun accelerates straight toward the vampire. The vampire steps forward and swings an arm to intercept but got hit. Sigun closes the distance and slashes as he passes, the blade cutting through the air. The motorcycle skids and spins across the ground while Sigun launches himself off it. The vampire snarls and notes that it is the same pattern as before. Sigun advances without hesitation, eyes fixed on the target. The vampire shouts in anger, asking if Sigun thinks he is a fool. Sigun completes the charge and strikes again, his sword arcing toward the vampire. The vampire shouts that he predicted everything. The vampire attacks. Sigun tries to block but fails. Sigun swings his sword upward in a powerful arc, but his sword breaks. He did not thought that sword will broke this easily. The vampire laughs and asks mockingly whether that was fun. Sigun curses angrily and lunges forward. The vampire grunts as Sigun struck his broken sword in the vampire. The vampire then drops to one knee after the exchange. The vampire struggles to breathe and reacts in confusion. The vampire begins to rise, trying to speak, trying to say boss. The boss appears and scolds him, asking if he was not told to stay put. Sigun acknowledges the situation, says it is good. He then states that he poured a full 5 million won into the organization. His fist tightens as he prepares to act. Sigun thinks that he needs to take at least this much back to balance the numbers. The vampire's eyes widen in shock. Sigun challenges him, asking if he should not. Sigun slashes downward, and blood sprays violently. The boss watches in silence. Sigun stands with his back turned, carrying a sword, while the boss comments that the gloves Sigun is wearing look strange and asks if they are from the 21st century. Sigun remains silent. The boss says it seems Sigun already expected them to show up and asks why Sigun is going this far. Sigun responds that you want me to explain my business. Se-gun raises his weapon and states that the reason is the boss's head, adding that if he understands, he should stop the nonsense and come at him. The boss replies that this reaction is new, and asks if Se-gun's blood type is AB, then says he has already finished analyzing Se-gun's style and claims Se-gun's knife is broken, and the gloves have already been figured out. She moves to attack, but Se-gun counters with America's weapon, and knocks him down. The boss, on the ground, mocks Se-gun and asks if that is all he has. When did he has this weapon? Se-gun advances and again delivers a decisive strike. He states that he already told the reason, and repeats that it is your head. Blue flames spread over the fallen body on the ground as Se-gun nearby, with blood visible around the scene. Se-gun turns his head sharply and lets out a brief cry of pain. He grips his injured arm and states that it cannot be helped. Se-gun leaps upward while clutching his arm, letting out a strange sound. After healing his hand, Se-gun moves with his motorcycle. Songdik greets Se-gun saying that he is finally out. Songdik asks whether Se-gun's stomach feels better after that little tantrum. Se-gun asks how Songdik tracked him. Songdik answers that there is something called GPS in this world. He comments that Se-gun is not like he used to be these days. Se-gun asks what Songdik means. Songdik explains that he is talking about the motorcycle, says Se-gun rides it much more recklessly than before, and adds that Se-gun used to treat it like some kind of sacred treasure. Se-gun remains silent. He gets on the motorcycle and says that it is none of Songdik's business. Se-gun rides off into the city. Songdik watches him leave and exhales slowly, whereas at night, the boss of the Sangdong gang, named as Jung Sangdong, questions whether that is all. He says they were all wiped out even though he sent 6 of them, and Yonghu apologizes to him. Sangdong praises the situation as impressive. He then says he does not know how the other found out. The group comments that the brat turned out to be a vampire hunter. Sangdong says this has become a headache, and that he turned a blind eye when those vampire hunter bastards were secretly picking off 1 or 2 of them. He adds that this incident has made the Sangdong gang look like a complete joke. Yonghu asks whether they should try contacting the Jokyo clan. Sangdong reacts angrily, accusing him of advertising that he is screwed. He says it was said to be a miner who rides a motorcycle, and Yonghu says it is not certain but that is what it looks like. Sangdong orders them to throw money at the kids if needed and find him no matter what, then orders them to find him and kill him without fail. When Yonghu interrupts, Sangdong asks if he didn't listen what he said. Bring that bastard's head this time for sure. The street is shown at night. Outside a convenience store, Se-gun and Songdik sit at a table. Se-gun says that Songdik was the one who told him the Sangdong gang is connected to the Jokyo clan. Songdik confirms that he said that. Se-gun asks why Songduk just leaves them alone, and asks if he is afraid of some gangsters. Songdik answers that he is not afraid. Se-gun says the reason must be because there is no money in it. Songdik adds that Se-gun knows him well. Se-gun says those people deserve to die, and that whether it makes money or not, the longer vampires are left alive the worse it gets. He asks if it is not just a spreading plague. He explains that cutting them down while they are still sprouts is much easier than cutting down a giant tree. He then asks if it is because Songdik has never lost anything precious before. Songdik challenges whether Se-gun thinks he is the one to judge who deserves to die. Songdik tells him not to make him laugh. He says he would not even kill a mosquito for the sake of an ideology, and that he only kills for money and profit. Se-gun stands in front of Songdik, and Songdik asks about him, then asks whether he injected himself with vampire blood. Songdik says he already told Se-gun that the blood of Jokyo line vampires is prone to causing mutations. He sighs and says he should not have agreed to a deal with a true vampire hunter. He tells Se-gun to pack his bags and get out today. Songdik says he does not want to get tangled up with the Jokyo clan because of someone like Se-gun. Se-gun agrees and says he will do that. Songdik thought that when Se-gun thinks about the bastards who killed his family still living their lives as if nothing happened, anyone would go crazy. He says old man Ju should not have brought up June for no reason. Songdik calls out Han Se-gun and says he put in a few knives and some ammunition. He adds that it is only about 500 rounds, and that Se-gun will probably die before he even uses all of it. Songdik tells him to be careful, and says they are Hungarian-made and past their storage date, and that if Se-gun is unlucky, the gun might just explode. Se-gun stays silent, then thanks Songdik for everything and bows. Songdik tells him not to go turning into a vampire or anything. Songdik tells Se-gun that if that happens, he will hunt him down without mercy. Songdik says he does not give free passes just because he raised Se-gun. Se-gun lowers his head and listens. That night was a night where the moon was so beautiful. Se-gun rides a motorcycle down a street at night, and it was enough to bring one to tears. A group stands around a burning barrel. A man introduces himself as Cheon Yonghu from Sangdong Credit Loans. Someone asks what else he wants. Yonghu says there is no need for a long talk, and asks who their leader is, saying he needs to speak with him. Jin replies that it is him and says he has no business with someone like them. The group reacts, and Yonghu clicks his tongue. He says he tried to play nice and complains about young brats being disrespectful these days. Several vampires reveal their red eyes and sharp teeth. The vampire pins Jin to the ground and holds him down as Jin groans in pain. A woman covers her face and cries out. Yonghu tells the others not to bend Jin too far because he needs to hold the handlebars. He mocks that this brat is supposed to be a biker. Jin yells for them to stop and says he will do it. Yonghu looks down at Jin. He orders a man to bring something over. The man asks what he means. Yonghu says he means the bag of money in the trunk, After that he says this is the down payment. He tells them to use it to tempt them with new bikes or buy some meat and do whatever they want. He then orders them to make sure the green-haired high school brat is brought before him. He asks if that is all understood. Jin nods weakly. Young-hoo says this is a warning. One of the vampire grabs Jin by the head and forces him down, making Jin cry out in pain. Young-hoo stops him and says they cannot have Jin dying before they even start. The vampire releases his grip. They stand in an alley as the group remains behind them. Young-hoo says it is getting dark and that this idiot is getting even stupider. It would be nice if he could be controlled with crosses or garlic. At the Song Hui's shop, the door opens. She apologizes and says they are closed for the day. She recognizes Sigon and says it has been a while, about 4 months. She says Sigon has become a fine man and has really grown a lot. Sigon says it is because he got growth hormone injections. She asks how it is and how Sigon feels about being independent. Sigon replies that she knew after all. She says Song Deokyeon raised Sigon because he received a request. She says that since she is Sylvie's spokesperson in Korea, she receives reports. She adds that it does not seem like Sigon came here for that. She asks what is going on. Sigon says he heard there is a tool that can detect vampires. Song Hui explains that the tool is called a bloodstone pendulum. She adds that finding vampires with it will not be easy, and says it senses nearby vampires, but the maximum detection range is only about 20 meters. Sagan says he will buy it right now. Song Hui reacts, and says she will not stop him if that is the case, but tells him it is better to use his funds wisely. She adds that there is also a crossbow equipped with silver chip quarrels, and asks how about that. Sagan replies that he already has a few weapons. Song Hui says that he does not have a real weapon in the true sense, and asks if Old Manju refuses to sell psychedelic moon to him. Sigan says it is probably because he is reluctant to deal with a minor. Seong Hui says there is no other vampire dealer as reliable as Old Manju, and adds that he must just be a man of principle. She suddenly realizes something and reacts. Sagan looks at Song Hui in confusion. Song Hui moves and says she has a few items that are only about VT13, and asks if she should give him those, saying this will be a secret between the two of them. She shows him a small vial. Sigun thanks Seong Hui. Sigun finishes. Song Hui informs him that cards are not accepted. Sigun acknowledges this and leaves. Later, Sigun is alone outside as time passes. He recalls when Sylvester asks whether Sigun consumed vampire blood and tells him not to whine, adding that misfortune is not his alone. He then welcomes Sigun to the world of the crazed moon. Sigun wonders if a year has already passed and questions whether Sylvester will even return to Korea. Jin calls out to Sigun, saying it has been a long time, and that he has changed so much he was hard to recognize, asking if it has been about a year. The group approach and comment that Sigun looks well, and that it is no wonder he could not be found no matter how much they searched. They ask what happened to his hair, and remark that he has grown tall, asking if he remembers them. Sigun responds by asking who they are. Jin reacts that the way Sigun speaks is the same as ever. He then insults him by saying Sigun's blood has not even dried yet, and adds that the more he thinks about it, the angrier he gets, saying he went through hell trying to find Sigun and calling him a bastard. Jin angrily tells Sigun that he went through hell trying to find him, and calls him a bastard. Sigun asks if Jin wants to die. When his pendulum glows, he realizes that here is a vampire, even though the sun is still out, and that a vampire who can move properly without losing strength under this kind of sun can only be a true vampire, a master of vampires. He notices a bloodstain and wonder if Jin was bitten by a vampire, noting that being bitten does not always lead to mutation, but judging from the state of his neck, he must be in the process of becoming a vampire. Sigun asks Jin if he is from the Sangdong gang. Jin says that since Sigun recognizes them immediately, there is no need to ask more. Sigun asks how much they are being paid. Jin answers that it is 2 million won just for the location, and 8 million won if they catch Sigun and bring him in. He adds that they have no intention of taking home a small cut. Sigun thinks that he would like to kill them right now, but there are too many eyes watching, and he then asks whether 8 million won is supposed to be a lot with this many people. He tells them that they have turned into total beggars. Jin reacts angrily and lunges forward, shouting in disbelief. Sigun tells them that if they want to keep their pride as bikers, they should fight like bikers instead of acting like thugs. Both of them move to their motorcycles and spread out onto the road. A man explains that since it is a cannonball, Sigun should already know the rules, and states that the finish line is the entrance to the Gyeonggan Expressway. Before race starts, let me tell you that a cannonball is a long-distance race with no rules. Jin remarks that it has been a while since they rode together like this. He says that Sigun should have behaved a bit better, just a little more gentle. They might have had a relationship where they could share a can of beer. Sigun then falls silent. Sigun tells Jin to take a good look at the sunset, saying that it will be the last sight he ever sees. Jin dismisses this as nonsense. The man raises his fist with a can and brings it down in a sudden strike. Sigun rides ahead, as motorcycles surge forward at high speed, their engines roaring while the road curves sharply. Jin chases closely behind on his motorcycle, pushing forward aggressively as the bikes weave through traffic and take a hard turn. The motorcycles skid across the road, scattering debris as they race past cars below from an overhead view. Jin laughs loudly while riding and mocks Sigun, saying he must not have ridden his bike in a while, and asking why he has gotten so slow. He adds that Sigun is all washed up. He calls out to Sigun, asking if he is listening. Se-gun thinks that feralization is progressing, but Jin is still human. He recalls when Songdiak mentions that if the premise requires killing a person, then there is no need to hesitate, repeating that if killing is required, hesitation is unnecessary. Se-gun suddenly veers away and accelerates in a different direction. Jin shouts at Se-gun, demanding to know where he is going. Jin continues riding at full speed, chasing after him along the curved road. Two other bikers notice the sudden change and question why both of them are acting like that all of a sudden. One of them points out that the highway entrance is in the other direction, whereas Young-hoo asks if Jin is chasing that guy right now. A man of Jin's group replies that rather than a chase, it is more like a race. Young-hoo reacts in disbelief, and asks what kind of nonsense that is. The man says that a man's battle should be called that. Young-hoo then curses, tells him to call the others back, and shouts in frustration, questioning what kind of battle this is. He thinks that Se-gun is more than the others think. Young-hoo says he is coming right now and orders them not to let Se-gun go anywhere and to keep him there. The answer comes that they lost him. Young-hoo reacts in shock. At a construction site under the red sky, the motorcycle arrives and stops. Jin calls out to Se-gun by name. He rides in and shouts at Se-gun, questioning whether he is running away in the middle of a race. Jin insults him, saying this is not what a man does and calling him a coward for fleeing. Se-gun responds that Jin just said he would not do it. Jin reacts in confusion. Se-gun strikes Jin in the neck while Jin is on his motorcycle. Jin coughs violently as the motorcycle loses balance and crashes. Se-gun stands over Jin, who lies on the ground beside his fallen motorcycle. Se-gun says that whether it was 1 year or 10 years does not matter. Jin should have ignored someone like him forever. Se-gun looks down at Jin, and says that it is painful. Jin lies on the ground, bleeding from his mouth. Se-gun says he will make it easier for Jin, and tells him to drink. Se-gun says that Jin might even survive. Jin's body reacts as something spreads inside him. Jin realizes that it does not hurt and finds it strange. Jin feels power overflowing. Jin's body convulses as the change intensifies. Jin lets out a distorted scream as his body transforms. Se-gun watches calmly as blue energy surges around Jin. Jin curses Se-gun and asks what he did to him. Whereas the group gather near parked cars and motorcycles, Young-hoo at the front stares ahead with a tense expression. He raises his arm and signals the others. Jin was no longer human. They saw the construction site under a red sky as smoke spreads. They reach there. Jin was a human whose feralization had already progressed. The blue flames continue to burn around the fallen motorcycle. Young-hoo looks shocked as he watches. Se-gun thinks that it was an unavoidable choice. It was necessary to kill. Although Se-gun did not know in what instance it would be necessary to kill a person, such a case did exist. A memory shows Jin riding a motorcycle, smiling, saying they could have been friends who shared a can of beer. Se-gun thinks that it existed, that kind of case in which there is always a necessity to kill. He motorcycle rides along the road at sunset, whether it really existed. A crowd stands at a crosswalk at night as people wait to cross the street. Someone politely asks to be excused. Inside a bar, a server stands holding a notepad and looks toward a seated customer. The server hesitates and asks what the customer would like to order. The seated man relaxes on the sofa and reassures the server that it is fine, adding that the server can speak Korean. The man smiles calmly and states that he understands everything. The server responds with relief and asks what she can get for him, and the man asks if they have champagne. Someone suddenly calls out for master. The man turns toward and asks what it is, calling him Bill. A boy enters with shock expression. He tells, outside at night, a girl suddenly runs into view and collapses onto the pavement. The man reach outside and see a girl near his car. He looks at Bill, and Bill reacts with confusion. After a while they move from a bridge. Inside the car, Bill looks at the girl. He asks his master if this is alright. The man remarks that leaving the Asian girl to the police would be questionable. He responds that everything in this world has a connection and addresses Bill by his full name, Wilhelm. He adds that he values that greatly. He then asks if Wilhelm does not know that best, having met him. Wilhelm admits that is true, but trails off. He continues that sometimes he does not know what the master is thinking. The man laughs and says that connections are not always rational. He proudly declares that he is a romanticist, and we got to know that he is a true vampire named as Phantom. A wide view shows the city at night spread out below. Phantom stands as Wilhelm reports that he returned that girl to the medical Yonsei center. Phantom praises him, saying good job, and remarks that he should go visit her sometime. Wilhelm asks why his master cares so much about that Asian girl. Phantom asks if he didn't told that he is a romanticist. Wilhelm opposes that his master do realize there is no such things as romanticist. If you are running away from your work, he says, if his master truly wants to find romance, then he should first finish his all works. And once that's done, then he don't care if his master buy flowers or do whatever else. Phantom remarks that flowers are good idea. He then asks if Wilhelm looked into it. Wilhelm confirms yes. He states that it was on TV recently and the girl's name is Yoon Mi-hee, and that it is said she was sexually assaulted by her classmates. After a while, Wilhelm remarks that, as expected, she was not an ordinary lady. He says that 6 high school girls instigated the rape. He adds that on the 4th, 6 students, including Miss W from a girls' high school, were booked without detention. Wilhelm explains that they reportedly instigated men around them to sexually assault the victim multiple times simply because she was usually disobedient and arrogant. Phantom comments that for the victim, it is a calm article that would make their blood boil. Wilhelm informs Phantom that a video of Sylvester has just arrived and asks if he would like to watch it. Phantom adds that Sylvester still seems to be poking around everywhere, and says he heard Sylvester went overseas to find Phantom, concluding that he must really hate him. He bends forward, lowers his glass, and says he thought he would have some fun visiting Korea after such a long time. Wilhelm says that man not only got Phantom excommunicated from the Vatican, still from all his master's account. Phantom agrees as yes. Wilhelm asks whether Phantom will not watch it. Phantom leans back with his head resting on his hand. He replies that he should not, but that he must watch it because Wilhelm was told to work. In the video, a vampire is shown sitting on the ground with blood spread across the pavement. Sylvester stands facing him in the dark. Phantom murmurs that it returns to ashes and dust to dust. The injured vampire begs to be spared. Sylvester looks down at him. Phantom asks if the vampire is begging for his life. Phantom states that the vampire filled his own veins with the blood of others. He asks whether the vampire is now claiming to be a living being. He says that if so, he should cry. Phantom holds out the glass of blood and tells him to cry and prove his purity. A blade presses against the vampire's neck as he screams in fear. Phantom remarks that see that, you can't cry and that is your limit. Sylvester raises his weapon and strikes downward. Blood splashes violently and spills through the air. Phantom swings his arm upward while holding the glass, scattering the blood. Sylvester looks at the camera that was recording and shows middle finger. Phantom says that he has not changed. He adds that his repertoire never varies, and calls him a failure as a poet, addressing him as Sylvester. Whereas we see Sagan on second day, he leans over a toilet and struggles, unable to eat anything. He thinks that it was an unavoidable choice. Sagan leans over a toilet and vomits violently. He recalls Songdek saying whether Sagan is going to judge and decide if someone deserves to die. Songdek says the idea is laughable, and tells him not to make him laugh. Sagan pauses and wonders what he was supposed to do. A cup of instant noodles remains untouched on a table. Sagan sits alone outside a convenience store under an umbrella. Sagan watches people passing by and wonders where they are all going so diligently. Sagan wonders what they are so busy with. A girl approaches and politely asks to be excused. Sagan reacts with confusion as she addresses him. The girl asks Sagan if Simone ever told him that he looks like Kurt Cobain. Sagan thinks that people do ask him if he is interested to join any group or something, but this is first time hearing something like this. A man interrupts the girl, and she says that's why she hates this. The man with his group questions if she is deaf or cannot hear what he is saying. The man asks who is this bastard. Sagan stands and walks away from there, while the group follows behind him, and one of them mutters in anger, again calling him a bastard. The man shouts at Sagan, asking where he thinks he is going. He yells that someone is talking to him right now. Sagan strikes him in the face. The man is thrown backward and crashes to the ground as blood splatters across the wall and pavement. The girl watches with wide eyes as Sagan stands calmly. Sagan apologizes and says he thought a bug had landed on the man. The injured man looks at the blood on his hand in shock. Sagan apologizes again as the man asks to follow them before they kill him. Sagan questions whether the act is to kill a person like him. Sagan turns his head slightly, reacting to something behind him. The girl looks down at her phone while holding it close to her face. The phone shows music playing as the sound continues. The music keeps playing. A man's foot swings down towards Sagan. Sagan is surrounded as several men rush in to attack him. Sagan twists his body and strikes back, throwing one man off balance. Another man charges straight at Sagan. The music continues as Sagan raises his fist. Sagan's punch lands directly on the man's face. Sagan follows through and forces the attackers backward. From below, the girl sits on the stairs while a man falls there. One man freezes with his hands raised as another is struck down, and the music continues to play. Sagan kicks forward as a man staggers back, crying out in pain. The man is knocked off his feet and slides across the ground while shouting in pain. The fallen man continues screaming as he tumbles and crashes onto the pavement. Sagan turns his head as he senses movement behind him. A man attacks hard on Sagan, stopping it mid-motion. An attacker lunges in from the side and the music continues to play. The man insists that he is not the one as he stares at Sagan in fear. Sagan advances steadily while the man backs away with his arms spread. The man swings a knife downward towards Sagan. Sagan blocks and counters as the blade comes down, stopping the attack. The man's eye widens in fear. Sagan drives his strike forward, sending the man reeling as blood sprays. Sagan looks down coldly and tells him to try more, reminding him that he said he would kill someone. The man's foot slams into the ground as Sagan demands more and urges him to try it. Sagan grabs the man and strikes him again while shouting for him to do it. He continues provoking him, demanding that he try and kill him. Sagan stands over the fallen man and questions whether this is really enough to kill someone. The music continues as the girl on the stairs watches with a tense expression. Sagan turns his head, his expression tightening. The girl looks back at him, startled. Sagan lowers his body and suddenly dashes forward down the alley. Blood splatters across the ground as his body crashes down. All men lie motionless across the alley, blood trailing between them, while the girl stands frozen near the stairs. The scene shifts to the exterior of a quiet cafe. Inside, Seung-hui cleans the floor alone and wonders if she should hire a part-timer. She pauses and looks toward the window as a car arrives outside. A black car pulls over, its door lifting open. She smiles and calls his name, Sylvester. Sylvester remarks that he already told not to call this name. She asks why he has returned, and why he is back much earlier than scheduled. He answers that it is because he likes Dostoevsky. Later, Sigun kneels on a bed in a dim room, his body tense and breathing heavy. Sigun looks down in confusion and wonders when he lost consciousness. A girl lies curled on the floor beside the bed and Sigun wonders where he is. He looks around the room and thinks that the place is a complete mess. Sigun sits up on the bed, holding a blood-stained cloth, and questions whether these are tissues, thinking it counts as first aid. The girl nearby asks if he is awake. Sigun hesitates before responding. She tries to explain but stops herself, then states that he was stabbed, and asks if he will be okay if he stays like that. Sigun turns toward her as she calls out to him. The girl moves closer and asks if he wants to do it with her. Sigun reacts in shock and asks what she means. She asks if he does not want to touch her as she leans in close to his face. The girl pulls back slightly, smiles nervously and says she is okay with it. Sigun stares at her in silence. He suddenly raises his voice, asking if she is crazy or high on something. The girl looks startled, then lowers her head and apologizes. Sigun calms down and explains that he has not eaten in days and was on edge, then adds an apology for beating up her boyfriends. The girl calls out to him softly as he turns away. Sigun pauses in response. The girl kneels in front of him and asks him to take her with him. Scene shifts and we see a cup instant noodles on a table. Sigun and the girl sit side by side at a convenience store counter. The girl eats eagerly, focused on the food in front of her. Sigun watches her and notes that she is really packing it away, thinking about his money. The girl quickly explains that they were not her boyfriends. Sigun reacts with mild surprise. The girl adds that she only followed them because she was afraid she would get lost. Sigun looks at her and asks if she thinks he is a kid. Sigun lowers his gaze, thinking about whether she is in the same situation as him. Sigun holds the cup of noodles in front of him. The girl smiles brightly and introduces herself as Jin Yumi. Sigun eats quietly and responds that he did not ask. Later, outside a large building, a man shouts in frustration. A group of doctors stand together as a man complains about what kind of hospital lets a kid just run away. Mihi stands in the hospital doorway in her pajamas. Staff restrain the agitated man and warn that his behavior may negatively affect his daughter. The man shouts that his daughter nearly died on the streets, and questions how he is expected to remain calm. He demands to know who would take responsibility if she had died. He challenges them, and asks if they could. Amidst that, Phantom steps forward holding a bouquet of red roses, and observes that he has arrived at a bad time. The man turns on Phantom and demands to know who he is. Phantom raises a finger and asks for a moment. The man suddenly freezes, his expression twisting as if struck by an unseen force. Colors ripple and distort as the space warps, and the surrounding staff stand rigid with shadowed faces. Mihi watches silently from the doorway. Phantom thinks about medical records and related data, noting that the girl had been hospitalized for an entire year. The thought continues that humans are less resilient than they believe. He concludes that if her spirit had already died, she would not have left the hospital. Phantom walks through the corridor and apologizes for the previous day. He admits he did not realize how much effort she put into escaping, and acknowledges that he brought her back to a place like this. Phantom asks her to come with him. Mihi looks at the bouquet of red roses, as Phantom smiles faintly and states that she does not really have a choice because she is now kidnapped after all. Mihi lowers her gaze without responding. The view shifts to a wide bridge over the river, as traffic moves steadily across the city. Inside a red car, Phantom responds affirmatively to Mr. Lou Gibson, identified as Phantom's business alias. Phantom gives an order to prepare a full set of women's clothes in every size. The response questions whether the clothes are for Master Wilhelm. Mihi holds the bouquet tightly as Phantom comments that his sense of humor has improved. Phantom adds that if he ever fires the speaker, then he could probably become a stand-up comedian. The other side remains silent. Phantom notes that if Wilhelm does not resist, it might not be a bad look. Suddenly, Phantom jerks forward as something strikes him from the side. Glass shatters around him as the impact twists his body in the car. The bouquet is crushed between them during the collision. Phantom smiles faintly despite the impact and curses under his breath while saying, "You bastard." The red car skids across the road amid broken glass. On a nearby rooftop, Sylvester in a coat stands calmly with a rifle, overlooking the city. He asks if that was a decent greetings or not. After that, scene shifts to a tall building. Phantom with Mihi enter together. A staff member greets Phantom as Master Lu Kim and asks whether he has arrived. He reports that everything requested has been prepared, then pauses. Phantom responds that the work is good. He then instructs that the bodyguard ladies be changed, noting that they cannot keep wearing patient gowns forever. The bodyguards acknowledge the order. The group moves inside, with Mihi holding a bouquet as the others follow behind. A handful of bullets is placed into a person's hands, with the remark that this is included as well. The recipient reacts in surprise. He explains that 6 shots were fired in the blink of an eye, all directed at her, and that it was a relief they were just standard bullets. He says that if they had been silver bullets, the outcome would have been different. She would have turned into a vampire from even the leaked blood particles. Phantom comments that Sylvester has certainly become quite the gentleman, whereas Segun sits beside his motorcycle and thinks that this is the limit. He notes that it is a miracle the engine even started, admits he has been riding it through all that chaos, and concludes that it was greedy of him to expect it to stay intact. Segun thinks about wanting to send the motorcycle for repairs right away, or sell it and buy a new one, then admits that he has no money. He looks down at his empty wallet while sitting beside the motorcycle. He wonders why the old geezer refuses to trade, and notes that he is not going to stop fighting vampires just because the man says no. He recalls being told that minors are not accepted, and decides that he needs to sell this vampire blood soon. He concludes that he will have to find another dealer willing to trade with a minor and questions how to do that. Yumi suddenly appears in front of him and happily calls him Kurt Cobain. She leans in close, and Segun reacts in confusion as she says her legs go numb. Yumi cheerfully asks where they are going now, while Segun notes that she is talking as if they have already been somewhere together. He responds that it is late, and that they should go to sleep. She asks where he lives. Segun tells her not to ask things like that, and instead asks about her friends. Yumi explains that they all went to meet their boyfriends, and that some of them went home too. Segun tells her that she should go home as well, then asks if her parents will not worry about her being out this late and wonders if she ran away from home. Yumi answers that she does not have any parents. She looks down and states that she is an orphan. Segun then tells her to get on the back and says he will take her home. They ride through the road together on the motorcycle, cars passing by as Yumi leans against him and closes her eyes. She thinks herself as a delinquent girl, an authoritative and tyrannical father. Yumi's father tells her to just die. Yumi's mother, crying and bruised, states that rather than living such a tedious and miserable life, she would rather just die. Resentment at being treated like a possession, and she kneels alone before her parents' funeral who died in an accident. She thinks that this is the fulfillment of a twisted wish. After that, she simply surrendered her body to the madness, repeating days in self-destruction. As Segun rides the motorcycle with Yumi behind him, he thinks that he cannot offer comfort or support, that he cannot live his life for her, and that he cannot take responsibility for her either. Segun thinks that even though Yumi talks without any rhythm or reason, after hearing her story 3 or 4 times it starts to make sense on its own, and he wonders if it is because she is similar to him that he understands her so well. He recalls Yumi suddenly asks Segun if he wants to do it with her. Segun reacts, thinking of her as a crazy girl. The motorcycle speeds through the road, the sound of the engine filling the night. They arrive at a quiet street, and Segun stops the bike, telling Yumi that they are here and that she should go inside. Yumi asks where he is going now, and Segun answers that he has to go home too. As Segun starts to leave, Yumi hurriedly asks where he is going, and then asks when she can see him again. Segun responds that meeting at a convenience store would be fine and suggests that they eat breakfast together again. While driving, Segun curses the motorcycle, calling it cursed, and thinks that if he keeps riding it just because it is memento, he will end up as ashes himself. He realizes that he has to find a way to make money somehow. Later, Segun rides the motorcycle alone through the street and arrives at a building, then enters inside. Inside a cafe, he calls out Sylvester's name. Sylvester turns around. Segun asks when Sylvester came to Korea, and Sylvester replies that it was not long ago. Sylvester asks whether Segun even takes requests and similar work. Segun looks at the documents and questions what they are. Sylvester reacts with irritation. As he reads, Sylvester states that Segun has become quite arrogant in the short time since they last met, then adds that perhaps Segun has simply decided that he wants to die. Sylvester asks Segun whether he knows someone here. Segun remains silent. Sylvester looks at it and says that it seems so. He guesses that their partner for this venture will be a helpless greenhorn. Rain falls over city buildings as someone said that for a brat from Phantasmagoria to come here, something strange must be happening. Well, Phantasmagoria is a vampire clan where Phantom serves as the lord. A group of men stand together indoors, followed by a close view of a red-eyed man named as Kyung from Jokyo clan touching his chin. Wilhelm says he looks decent enough for a human. Kyung remarks that a puppy putting on airs in its master's arms does not know its place, adding that the master is the same. Wilhelm warned that people who cozy up to mere gangsters should know better than to speak carelessly of him. As for them all, they will not even have arms left to be held anymore. Angry shouts follow, accusing him of causing this while the master was fighting Chang Jin, and blaming a cowardly true vampire hunter for interfering, until Kyung cuts them off and says that is enough. He says that the conversation has strayed off course, and they are told to state their main point and get lost. A suitcase is pushed forward across the floor. Kyung asks whether he is telling them to take this and leave, even though it was a surprise attack, then state that the true vampire hunter is the one who killed their master. He says that to fight someone like that, this amount is nowhere near enough. Wilhelm clarifies not to misunderstand and explains that the money is not to help with their revenge, adding that none of their esquires are even in Korea right now. Kyung then asks why the other party came in the first place. Wilhelm says that the target wanted is someone much weaker than that. Kyung reaches forward and takes a photo from the table, then looks down at it. Wilhelm tells the person in the photo is Sylvester's disciple, and that this amount should be more than enough even for people like them. They ask for the location, and the answer is given as Gwangju, Seoul, followed by a remark asking if there is anything beyond that. Kyung says that they will have to earn their keep, then comments that this is a truly terrible client. Young-hoo reacts angrily and curses under his breath. Kyung then asks if this is someone he know. After a brief pause, Young-hoo confirmed that he is the high schooler who came to the club last time. Kyung reacts in shock, and Wilhelm concludes that the work will be finished quickly. Kyung answers in agreement and states that he can earn his keep in no time. Later, Phantom and Mihi stand by a large window overlooking the city at night. As Mihi asks whether Phantom is rich, the reply confirms that this is undeniably true. She then asks why he is interested in her. He explains that the reason is difficult to put into words and suggests calling it the sentiment of a kinsman. He is then asked whether he will really grant everything that is wished for, and the answer follows that if it is possible, then anything. The wish is stated as wanting to go to the place where those people are. He says haunt, then says that even if someone survives after enjoying their full allotted lifespan and continues to live endlessly, there will be a sound they begins to hear. It is a voice the living can never hear, vivid and clear, inciting destruction and death. He says it's like a chronic illness that comes from living in a body like this. Phantom stated that he valued endurance more than pleasure. He questioned what he meant by endurance. Phantom explained that endurance was the strength to live through the world while bearing pain, and that if something had to be protected through endurance, even the flames of hell could feel sweet to a little lady. He asked if he truly believed that. Phantom answered that he did. Phantom said that he did not intend to force his values on her, but if she kept living, good things would surely happen. He questioned whether they truly had. Then she called him a liar. Phantom said there were days when he could more or less believe that lie, and that was the truth. He stated that it did not matter anyway. Phantom thinks that this was the worst and that he had no lingering attachments to life. He thinks it would not be so bad to get revenge, and addressed the child who would become the youngest of his bloodline. He turned her gaze to the side and began to move. Phantom held Mihi close in front of the window. Wilhelm approached and told Phantom that he had said the Jokyo clan. He widened his eyes in shock and called out to Phantom. Phantom was seated while Mihi lay against him drinking his blood. Wilhelm clenched his teeth as dark energy gathered around him. Phantom reached out his blood-stained hand and told him to come along too before he changed his mind. He remarks that witnessed the beginning of new era. Meanwhile, Sylvester describes Phantom as a filthy, disgusting creature. No matter how long he may have lived, his body has rotted to the core from drowning in wealth and power. And yet, Sylvester questions whether he truly believes he can save humanity or something. Sylvester states that he is not even a god. Sigun turns slightly and asks what he will do then. Sylvester says, "Bang." Sigun lowers his gaze in silence, then begins walking away. Sylvester calls his name, Sigun. Sigun pauses and catches a small object between his fingers that Sylvester throws. Sylvester explains that the target of pure hatred comes from the woman taken in by the vampire king. Sigun stands in the light while Sylvester tells him to choose wisely. Sylvester warns him not to be an idiot. Later, Sigun rides forward through the rain on his motorcycle as the engine roars and the bike speeds ahead. Sigun's vampire-detecting artifact suddenly appears in the center of his chest and glow. He leans forward over the motorcycle and continues riding through the storm. A large vampire in the form of a bat flies above him in the dark sky. Sigun looks up and recognizes it as bats. A massive shadow drops down toward him from above. Sigun shouts as the dark shape crashes down. The monstrous vampire with glowing red eyes lunges forward in a wolf-like form, bearing sharp fangs and snarling. Sigun bends lower over the motorcycle and accelerates as the engine roars again and the bike surges forward. His motorcycle bursts across the wet road at high speed. Watching from behind, a female vampire refers to him as this kid and asks whether he is the brat lord mentioned. The male vampire answers that it looks like it. From above, the road stretches through the rain while Sigun speeds away on the motorcycle. The female vampire notices the weapon and reacts with surprise, wondering who that is and how he managed to get a real gun. She adds that gun possession is illegal in Korea. Sigun suddenly pulls the motorcycle upward. The front wheel rises high as the motorcycle tilts vertically in front of the female vampire. She stands facing him, while the motorcycle lifts toward her. Sigun calmly raises the handgun and points it toward the female vampire. Gunfire erupts as the shots strike near him. She shouts that Sigun scared her. She twists the motorcycle and throws it away. The male vampire watches as the motorcycle flies upward into the rain. Sigun lands on the ground. The female vampire mutters that this is bad. She comments that the brat is pretty skilled. The male vampire immediately responds that she just sucks. She reacts with surprise. In the rain, Sigun remains crouched on the road as the confrontation continues. He stands in the rain holding 2 guns and notes that there are 3 rounds in the Tokarev and 5 in the Type 54. Even if he empties all of them into the vampires, he does not think he can win. The female vampire leans forward and remarks that, well, anyway. Dark whip-like appendages extend from her body and lash outward. Behind her, the male vampire approaches across the rain-soaked road. The female vampire lifts one of the dark appendages toward her mouth and wonders if she should refill what she has spilled. Sigun suddenly moves forward across the wet road. He shouts for them to move, calling them sons of bitches. He raises both guns and fires upward. As the muzzle flashes burst through the rain, the vampires move through the air while the bullets streak toward them. The male vampire states that even if the bullets are silver processed, something like a Tokarev could never do the job. He declares that there is not a chance in hell. His dark appendages surge downward through the rain as the attack rushes toward Sigun. Sigun dashes forward across the rain-soaked road, while dark appendages chase closely behind him. The 2 vampires watch him move. They suddenly rushes forward and closes the distance in an instant. The male vampire appears directly behind Sigun and asks where he thinks he is going. Sigun's foot slides across the wet ground as he tries to keep moving. The vampire strikes him from behind with a heavy blow. Sigun's body jerks forward from the impact. His gun slips from his hand and falls through the rain. The weapon spins as it drops toward the flooded road. Sigun twists his body and swings his arm while turning toward the vampire behind him. The female vampire stares at him with glowing red eyes. Segun suddenly raises the other gun in his hand. Female vampire's dark appendages wrap around his arm. He lets out a strange sound as the force pulls him. The appendages whip him upward and throw him into the air. His body flies across the rain-filled sky. Below, the vampire stands with the dark appendages stretched outward. Segun continues spinning through the air as the rain pours down. Both vampires remain on the road watching him. Segun crashes down hard onto the rain-soaked ground. Segun lands while the dark appendages remain wrapped around him, his gun still in his hand. The vampire asks how long he plans to keep acting tough. The appendages tighten and pull. Segun's body is lifted and dragged upward through the rain. The female vampire raises both arms. She declares that she already said it would not work. Her dark appendages slam Segun down violently into the ground. His body strikes the wet road and lies motionless on his back. The two vampires stand nearby watching him. The female vampire clicks her tongue in irritation. A memory appears of Yumi in Segun's mind. She leans forward playfully, then sits on a bench with her legs crossed. She smiles warmly. Back in the rain, Segun lies on the cracked road as steam-like breath escapes his mouth. The two vampires stand in the distance while he remains on the ground. The male vampire catches Segun with his dark appendages and drags Segun across the rain-soaked road. His body is pulled along the ground while the two vampires watch. The female vampire looks forward and calmly states that it is time to eat. Suddenly a shot strikes her head, and blood bursts outward. The male vampire reacts immediately and demands to know who the hell that is. In the rain, Songdiak appears holding a long gun fitted with a suppressor. He remarks that this little situation is ridiculous, trying to fight a vampire without even using psychedelic moon. He angrily calls Segun a crazy bastard and questions whether that is how he taught him. The vampire spreads the dark appendages outward and points ahead, shouting for the other to look over there. Songdiak's blue eyes sharpen as he grips the weapon. In the next instant he launches forward, cutting through the air with a powerful strike. Songdiak rushes forward through the rain and collides with the vampire. In an instant, Songdiak fires a round on the vampire. He crashes down and struggles, letting out a rough sound. Songdiak lands and steadies himself while holding the rifle. The male vampire runs from there after knowing that female vampire is dead. Nearby, Segun pushes himself up from the ground. Songdiak states that he is going after that guy too. He tells Segun that he should hurry up and suck the vampire's blood first, then guard the goal. In the distance, the wounded vampire moves through the trees. Segun sucks the female vampire's blood in and injects himself. He realizes that the vampire's bloodline must be a true one, because the feeling of her blood is completely different from those mediocre vampires. He concludes that this must be why the vampire was so strong. Segun stands in the rain with blood staining the back of his shirt, his fist tightening as he faces forward. Rainwater splashes as he grips the sword hilt and lifts it from the ground. Scene shifts and we see several bodies lies motionless on the wet pavement. Segun stands in front of them, facing the scene. In another place, several bodies lie scattered across the ground. Segun walks forward through the rain. He states that he has weapons too. His hand tightens around the sword. He places the pill on his tongue, then declares that he is trained. Bright swirling colors burst outward around him as the energy spreads. Segun stands in the center of the glowing light, with both arms slightly spread. As the power rises around him, the colors fade into a glowing haze. Segun lowers into a stance, gripping the sword while stating that he is not the same as back then. He walks forward with a sword hanging in his hand. His eye focuses sharply ahead. He continues with the thought that even so, he had hoped she would not die. Seeing the scene in front of him, he starts crying. Yumi lies motionless on the bed while Mihi stands there. Segun declares that in the beginning, the Lord created Adam from dust, and created Eve from Adam's bone. Death is a holy ritual of returning to Eden. Segun points the gun on Mihi's head. He declares ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Meanwhile, rain falls as Sylvester stands holding his sword while the male vampire stands injured. Sylvester attacks and his strikes tear across the male vampire as blood bursts outward. Songdiak reacts that if the body is shredded like that again, he will not be able to draw a blood sample and asks for something to be left intact. Below them, blue flames burn across the ground. Sylvester states that there is no time to explain and tells him to go get the kid quickly. Songdiak wonders if Sylvester is not coming with him. Sylvester explains that too many eyes are watching now, and Songdiak asks whether something else is out there beside phantoms. Songdiak's expression tightens with worry. He asks if it could be Tetra Annex. Flames suddenly burst upward and spread across the building. Later, Songdiak stands beside the vehicle while the firelight reflects across the street. Headlights shine across the wet road. Songdiak asks Segun if he is okay. Segun stands at the doorway holding a red bag while blood stains the floor beneath his feet. He looks forward and quietly asks if Songdiak can give him a ride. Red emergency lights flash in the rain as fire trucks rush toward the burning building. Firefighters jump down and run toward the flames. From above, the fire spreads across the structure while smoke rises into the rainy sky. Sylvester stands on a balcony overlooking the city and the burning area below. Rain falls around him as he remains still. Lightning flashes in the sky, while several cats gather around his feet. Sylvester quietly tells them to spit it out. One cat lowers its head and drops several bullet casings onto the wet ground. Sylvester stands among the animals while rain continues to fall. Well, some time ago, scene shifts at a building named as Arjuna. Sylvester arrives there. Inside, Sylvester sits facing Phantom. Sylvester remarks that Phantom must have lost his mind by barging into Arjuna like this. Phantom explains that he has a matter to discuss that requires this level of discretion. Sylvester observes that Phantom has spent all this time avoiding him, and asks what changed his mind to come here in person. Phantom admits that before that, he knows it is a bit late to bring it up, but he cannot play the part of the weeping vampire. He tells Sylvester to go pester some other true vampire instead. Sylvester tells him to stop the nonsense, and asks why he is here. Phantom suggests that Sylvester should not be so cold, and proposes that they simply chat for a while. After all, it is not as if they are short on time, since they have near infinity at their disposal. Sylvester remarks that hearing someone who steals human time just to survive preaching about infinity is something he has neither the patience nor the interest for. He leans forward and demands that Phantom explain his real purpose for coming here. Phantom looks toward him and addresses him as Sylvester. He advises him not to try so hard to get on Tetra Anax's bad side. Sylvester remarks that a vampire worrying about a vampire hunter is touching. Phantom answers that it is not worry but a warning. Sylvester questions what would happen if he refuses to play nice. He then places his gun on the table and asks if Phantom is looking for a fight. Sylvester looks down at the weapon and responds that he would not mind settling it right there. Phantom then explains that their position is quite different from the days when savagery was the only law, and that for him to engage Sylvester like a common brute now would be a violation of his aesthetics. He sets his cup down and continues that regardless of what Sylvester may think, Phantom declares that he is the king of vampires and the king of humans. He adds that today marks a special occasion, a day to bestow the gift of vengeance upon the newest child of their bloodline. He pauses and looks toward Sylvester. Phantom remarks that he hopes Sylvester will not make him too angry, calling him his dear stalker. He then states that now that he has addressed the business Sylvester was so keen on, he will take his leave. Sylvester watches him silently. Phantom comments that the coffee was good. Later, in the rain outside, Sylvester stands holding the small casing while thinking that trying to send Deok-yeon with him out of concern was pathetic. He then notices Segun and Songdeok approaching. He asks what were they thinking not even retrieving the shell casings. Segun sits on a bench. Sylvester approaches and remarks that in the end it seems Segun could not get what he wanted. Segun addresses Sylvester by name. Sylvester lifts his head slightly. Segun asks if he looks like Kurt Cobain. Sylvester responds that Segun's head must be scrambled because he is talking nonsense. Segun leans back on the bench under the rain and laughs loudly. He then leans forward and covers his face with both hands, while the rain pours over him. From above, the empty rooftop area stretches under the heavy rain while a distant fire burns across the city. The scene shifts to a tall city building. In an alley, 3 men stand outside a building. One complains that the boss is such a jerk, saying there are not even that many customers but he piles on a ton of work. Another agrees and remarks that when the boss is alone he never does any of it himself. The first man adds that it is not like they can report him to the labor office. Another responds that the boss still seems like a decent guy to him, and even pays someone like him a salary. One of the men suddenly pauses and tells the others to hold up. He then asks what that sound is. In the dark alley ahead, a strange noise echoes as something moves. A large horned creature slowly emerges from the darkness while the men stare toward it. They wonder what is that? A beggar, but this big. Is he eating something, but what is he eating? One of the men wonders what they should do now and asks if the 3 of them together could take it. The creature stands in the alley with its large body crouched low. Its eyes glow red as it stares ahead. The 3 men stare at it while one of them holds up his phone to see more clearly and starts recording. He murmurs that it looks like a monster. Suddenly, the creature lunges forward. Its attack slams into one of the men with a violent impact. Blood bursts outward as the strike tears through him. The remaining 2 men recoil in shock as blood splashes across them. The creature stands upright in front of them, towering over their bodies. One of the men remarks that it looks even bigger now. The creature's skull-like head turns while its red eyes glow in the dark. The creature thinks that he is sure he was human once. He reflects that he does not know when it started. One day, for no reason, a brutal and savage thirst and hunger came over him. From that day on, even who he was started to blur. The hunger clawed up his throat like hands tearing it open. Before he could resist, his consciousness snapped. By the time he came to again, he had already devoured countless corpses. Even then, it did not stop. He wonders if people were always this delicious. Scene shifts and we see night hangs over a quiet park beneath the crescent moon. A man wearing glasses walks along the path. Suddenly a loud crash echoes. The man jumps in shock. The same creature with glowing red eyes leaps down from above. He lands on the ground and rushes forward. The man falls backward as the creature charges toward him. The creature tears the man into half as blood sprays across the ground. A man inside a building raises his phone and takes a picture. The creature's red eyes glow as it stares ahead. He keeps attacking as bodies are thrown and blood splashes around it. He screams that he is hungry. Morning comes over a warehouse-like building. Songdeok asks why the old man looks scared of getting caught now, and why all the lights are off. He says he thought the old man would be closed by now. The old man answers that it is hard to do business when no one is bringing in product. He adds that neither Songdeok nor that punk Jongjun has shown their faces in ages. Songdeok stays silent. The old man grunts, unlocks the door and switch on the light. Bright light spills into the building as the 2 step inside. Machines power on. A television turns on, and the news begins reporting that late at night in a park in Gongseogu, Seoul, an unidentified being appeared. The old man tells Songdeok to hand him the bag. The news reports that several people were reportedly slaughtered at random. According to one witness, a monster burst out from a manhole cover and attacked people. Police state that they believe it to be a motiveless killing by a drunk or a socially frustrated assailant. Citizens who are at the scene strongly disagree. One person insists that the thing was not human. Another answers that it could not possibly be human. The report continues, questioning what kind of alcohol someone would even have to drink for a human body to be split clean in half like that. Song Deok mutters that it might be a corrupted. He reflects that if there is one unspoken rule between vampire hunters and vampires, it is that they stay in the shadows. What they do must never come to the surface. He adds that that rule has now been completely blown to pieces. The old man explains that vampires will start crawling out and try to handle the situation themselves. Hunters looking to cash in on it will flock there too. Song Deok looks to the side and remarks that things are going to turn into a mess again any day now. Elsewhere, police tape stretches across the scene marked "Do Not Cross." Police line. Night hangs over the park beneath the crescent moon. Near a row of vending machines, the creature crouches low on the ground, its body hunched and still. Suddenly, a fast strike slams into it, sending its body crashing across the ground as blood bursts outward. The creature scrapes along the pavement and stops. Two male vampires walk along the path nearby, and Kyung comments that it is quite a racket. The creature crouches again in front of them. He remarks that people trying to sleep nearby are going to wake up. The creature's skull-like face lifts, its red eye glowing as it growls. The vampire named as Yoo-hoo tells Kyung to move and casually calls out toward the creature. He lands in a low stance, his clawed hands extended. Yoo-hoo turns his head slightly, a red glow shining from his eye as he smirks. He urges the creature to come on. The creature lunges forward toward him. He rushes straight at it. In the next instant, his claws tear through the creature's arm, slicing it open as blood sprays through the air. The creature snarls, its skull-like face twisting as its red eyes glow. Yoo-hoo slams down with another strike. The creature reels back. It suddenly grabs him and smashes him down into the ground. He crashes hard and gasps in pain. The creature lifts its arm high and attacks. Suddenly Kyung interferes and attacks the creature. The creature is hit by a massive blast-type attack. Yoo-hoo insists that he did not need his help, and that something like this could have been handled alone easily. Kyung warns that this is not a game and tells him not to let his guard down. He remarks that in comics this is exactly the moment when they always let the enemy get away. Yoo-hoo quickly tells him not to jinx it. Suddenly a bullet pierces Yoo-hoo's head. Kyung turns his head and calls out. The creature appears, holding a gun. A burst of gunfire erupts. Explosions and bright flashes tear through the area as bullets rip across the ground and bodies. Kyung hides behind a tree. He shouts in anger and calls the attacker a crazy bastard. He steadies himself and breathes heavily. Suddenly he screams in fury. His body shifts as horns rise from his head, and his form changes. His eyes glow intensely. He glares forward and declares that the little bastard will definitely be killed by him. Well, Yoo-hoo lie motionless on the ground while blood spreads beneath him. The creature's shadow looms over his body. The creature stands nearby with its glowing red eyes and twisted form. The next morning, inside the cafe, Song-hui at the counter notices someone and asks if Segun is there. Outside, a motorcycle is parked in front of the building. She remarks that she does not think she has seen that bike before and wonders if it is a new ride. Segun answers that it is. He explains that he was lucky enough to find a dealer willing to trade with a minor. Song-hui observes that he looks well dressed. She adds that he is starting to look like a real hunter. Segun asks where Sylvester is. She replies that Sylvester is sleeping upstairs and is probably waking up around now. Inside a dim room, Sylvester sits on the floor holding a gun. Segun steps into the doorway. Sylvester raises the gun and points it forward. Segun looks at him calmly. He remarks that it is good to see him again. The gun remains aimed directly at Segun. Sylvester tells Segun to break the habit of barging into people's rooms while they are sleeping, warning that one day he might get shot for it. Segun walks further into the room and remarks that hearing that while Sylvester is dressed like that ruins all credibility. Sylvester then asks what the matter is. Segun explains that it is about the case that has been all over the news lately. Sylvester clarifies that he means the monster that openly killed people in the park. Segun repeats the question and asks what Sylvester thinks about it. After a brief pause, Sylvester remarks that, as he thought, the country still does not have its vampire clans properly sitting behind the wheel of society, which is why things like that are running loose. Segun looks at him and questions what he means by leaving it alone, pointing out that people are dying out there. Sylvester answers that it is a corrupted, and that if left alone it will die on its own. He then tells Segun not to come to him for answers because he is not his private tutor. Sylvester adds that besides that, whatever the situation is, he wants to know what it actually means to Segun. Segun responds that Sylvester says that, but there must be something more to it. Sylvester lets out a quiet sigh and explains that the blood of a corrupted is worthless. He continues that a corrupted only ends up dragging out executioners. He explains that a corrupted is the result of a botched mutation and becomes so consumed by thirst and hunger that it no longer bothers hiding what it is. This means those people will crawl out to protect their clan. He loads a round into the gun. He then mentions the executioners. Sylvester explains that they are high-class vampires who were practically impossible to track before.
Se-gun realizes that they are using the corrupted as bait. Sylvester confirms that this is exactly the case. He adds that for hunters who work for money, it is a wonderful opportunity. He watches his phone that reports introduces itself as Vamplik Finder and welcomes the user, explaining that it is a source for the latest linked information. Se-gun looks and wonders what it is supposed to be. Sylvester tells him to stay quiet. The news then announces that it has a piece of information hotter than anything else right now, and that everyone must be eager to know it. The corrupted currently roaming soul has been identified as the former hunter Jong Jun. Sylvester quietly acknowledges that it is this one. He remarks that this situation is going to become a very cruel business for Song Diak.
Scene shifts. At a container yard at night, a group of men met beside a truck. A case filled with stacks of money was placed on the ground, and one of them told the other to check it out. A man named as Kenneth Yang crouched beside the case and examined the money. After a moment, Kenneth Yang, an arms dealer, decided that everything looked about right. He then opened the back of the truck while the others watched. Inside, a collection of rifles and other firearms was displayed on racks and shelves. Kenneth Yang closed the truck and commented that he would prefer they did not kill people out in the open if possible. They were guns after all. After a brief silence, Kenneth Yang got into the vehicle while the others remained nearby. The red-eyed man raised his gun and mocked Kenneth Yang as a stupid fool. He questioned why anyone would buy a gun if not to kill people. Kenneth Yang glanced back and warned him that it would be best not to do anything stupid. Standing beside the truck while several armed men surrounded him, he added that if someone got on a competent arms dealer's bad side, all the weapons they were holding would eventually become scrap metal. With a gun aimed at his back, Kenneth Yang calmly continued and wondered whether their Mosquito brothers had any long-term vision. The red-eyed man pressed the gun against Kenneth Yang and demanded to know if this was really the time to act so relaxed. He reminded him that the weapon was loaded and insulted him for being an idiot. Without turning around, Kenneth Yang pointed out that if a hole were blown through his head right now, they would have nowhere to get bullets in the future. The red-eyed man hesitated and lowered his weapon. Another man then claimed they had merely been joking. He remarked that a competent arms dealer was indeed different. He noted that Kenneth Yang remained completely calm even with a gun aimed at his back. Kenneth Yang pointed out something even more important. He remarked that a human trading with vampires was already fascinating enough on its own. The vampires listened as he continued that aiming a gun at an arms dealer was a thoroughly disagreeable matter. Leaning against the vehicle, Kenneth Yang paused and thought. He then raised his hand and flicked his fingers. Afterward, he casually announced that next time he would be charging a 10% surcharge and told them to keep that in mind. The red-eyed vampire stared at him and questioned what he meant by next time. A moment later, laughter broke out among the group, and one of them answered that he would keep that in mind. Kenneth Yang watched them leave, then let out a relieved breath. He muttered that the children of Hecate were ugly beyond compare. He rubbed his face and complained that those people truly had no manners, just as the rumors claimed. He felt that encounter had taken 10 years off his life. Scene shifts. As Song Daok drove away, he received a message saying, perhaps they had changed while hunting the Juk-Yi clan vampires. It could simply be a side effect of Psychedelic Moon. Everyone knew there was a bounty on that corruptor. He wondered why they cared so much about a corruptor that brought in no money, but it seemed they believed their very survival depended on it, and the reward was an enormous 100 million won. Thinking about it, Song Daok found the situation unbelievable. Vampires had placed a bounty on vampire hunters. He then remembered a piece of news. At the southern end of Yanghua Bridge, near Han River Park, a police officer's body had been found on the ground beside a patrol car. The report stated that the monster had appeared again. The terrifying creature with glowing red eyes stood among the wreckage and bodies. The news had only delivered the information, leaving the judgment to others. Meanwhile, the monster looked toward two vampires standing above. One wondered if the police can handle this creature. One remarked that even if this was a remote corner of the East, they should not underestimate the police of this country. The creature suddenly charged forward. The long-haired vampire moved and stopped it, telling it not so fast. At the same moment, countless red threads spread through the air and surrounded the battlefield. The threads struck the creature from every direction, cutting into its body and sending blood flying. The creature let out a painful scream as the attacks continued to tear through it. The long-haired vampire called out to Echelon and asked why he did not finish it. Instead, he suddenly shouted for Echelon to move. A sharp attack pierced through the long-haired man's body. Blood burst from the wound as he was thrown back and crashed onto the ground with a cry of pain. Echelon rushed to his fallen companion and demanded to know who had done it. The man smiled and remarked with surprise that Jokyo vampires were running wild, despite having no foothold in Korea. The battlefield came into view. The corrupted creature crouched on the ground while Echelon remained beside his injured companion. Police officers and armed personnel had arrived and surrounded the area. One of the armed men spoke. He said that capturing both the vampires and the corrupted at the same time was like killing two birds with one stone, and that the boss would be very pleased. Echelon glared at him and remarked that he had become obsessed with criticism. The man laughed and replied that it was still better than being obsessed with blood. Smiling, he added that perhaps they were not so different after all. Without warning, Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Dark, wing-like shadows burst forward as Echelon dodged through the barrage and rushed straight toward the attackers. The armed man raised his weapon, but Echelon reached him in an instant and struck. Blood sprayed across the air as the attack landed. Echelon glared at the man and told him to go to hell. The man grinned and said that he appreciated the passion, but asked if Echelon was underestimating humans a little too much. As Echelon charged forward, the man rushed to meet him and started cursing at him. More armed men raised their weapons and opened fire from every direction. Gunfire filled the area as bullets rained toward Echelon. Blood burst into the air when one of the attacks struck him. Explosions and continuous gunfire shook the battlefield, but the man watched calmly without concern. Later, another man laughed while holding a blood-filled container. He remarked that it had been a long time since he had seen a high-class vampire. The armed man carrying a rifle warned that since they were dealing with Jukyo's blood, they had better be careful not to ruin the goods. The armed man noticed something and looked up in confusion. In the distance, someone shouted for them to stop and leave that guy alone. The bald man turned toward the voice in surprise. Looking back at the creature, or say corrupted vampire lying on the ground, the bald man wondered why they would catch him. He explained that the man was currently nothing more than high-grade bait. The corrupted vampire remains sprawled on the blood-stained ground while the armed man says that even if they let him loose, the vampires would gather on their own. He added that settling for a measly 100 million would be a waste. He then asked for the transmitter and told someone to bring it to him. At that moment, the corrupted vampire suddenly moved and lunged forward at high speed. The man rushed through the air and crashed into the corrupted vampire, knocking him away. He grinned and wondered where he should stick it, asking if rumors would spread that he had put it in a good place. He immediately slammed into the corrupted vampire and drove the attack into his body. The corrupted vampire swung his body and knocked a man to the ground. Watching the scene, someone reacted with interest. The corrupted vampire landed on all fours and steadied itself. Seeing that, the man remarked that this was good, and that he was still lively. The corrupted vampire then sprinted away into the distance along the riverside road, while the group watched him go. The man grinned and called everyone to move out. With the armed group gathered behind him, he declared that the night fishing was starting now. Later, several vehicles sped down the road at high speed. Inside one of the cars, the man suddenly noticed something ahead and wondered what it was. A large truck rolled forward, and several armed vampires stood on top of it, the same vampire that bought weapons from Kenneth Yang. Seeing them, the man's expression changed in alarm. He shouted for the driver to turn the car around immediately. A blonde vampire aimed a rocket launcher and fired. The rocket streaked across the road and slammed into the vehicles. A massive explosion erupted, engulfing the cars in flames and debris. One vehicle burst through the fire and continued forward while burning wreckage scattered behind it. As the attack continued, several armed vampires calmly advanced and opened fire. The highway became littered with wrecked and damaged vehicles as smoke and flames filled the area. The man ended up sitting on the ground beside a damaged vehicle. The vampire wondered what this was. The man sat against the overturned vehicle, while the vampire recognized the newcomer as the alchemist bastard's lackey. The blonde vampire stood before him, drank blood, and wondered why he had not seen him in the States. He questioned whether that man had come to Korea. The man glared at him and clicked his tongue, cursing the children of Hecate. Sitting beside the overturned vehicle, the man mocked the vampires and wondered since when vampires had become so weak that they needed heavy armor. As the vampire tightened his grip on the blood packet in his hand, he dismissed the idea of weakness and said it should be called preparedness. The blonde vampire crouched beside him and mentioned that people were saying the god demon hunter who killed Jokyo and Chongjin was in Korea. He added that coming to a country with someone like that while completely unarmed sounded much more entertaining. The man forced out a grin and thought that the blonde vampire had a point. The blonde vampire aimed the gun to the man's face and shot, then bared his fangs with a wide smile, ordered his men to search him because there had to be a tracking device. The others immediately searched the dead man and others. A device was found, displaying a map and a tracked location on its screen. A vampire checked the device and concluded that it was connected only to FM. Satisfied with that answer, the blonde vampire simply remarked that it was good. A grin spread across his face as he suggested having a quick midnight snack. Someone struck the vampire holding the device beside the overturned vehicle. Black blood burst from his head as he coughed and struggled. The blonde vampire stared at the scene in surprise and realized that cellular rounds had been used. An explosion erupted behind him. He quickly turned toward the source of the disturbance. Veins spread across his face as his expression hardened. He recognized the arrival of a true vampire hunter. Under the moonlight, Sylvester stood on a high point with a sword in hand and a gun on his shoulders, overlooking the battlefield. He looked down at the scene and remarked that they seemed to have many unwelcome guests today. Sylvester cut through the surrounding vampires with a series of swift slashes while the vampire watched the battle and remarked that taking on so many vampires at once was impressive. Sylvester continued charging through the battlefield, defeating every vampire in his path. Seeing the scene, the vampire admitted that he could not help but be impressed, then laughed with excitement and declared that beings like them had become so accustomed to death that their everyday lives had become utterly barren. As he lunged forward, he recognized Sylvester as the magnificent Grim Reaper. Sylvester struck the attacking vampire and then raised his sword high. He told the vampire not to attach any meaning to what was happening because, to him, erasing the vampire's pain was all it was. Scene shifts and we see the corrupted running through the roads. A group of onlookers stared toward the corrupted. Hunku remarked that those people looked frightening. He lit a cigarette, looked at the scene and wondered whether they had ever really been human. He let out a breath and called it a truly nauseating sight. He greeted the others and told them to wrap everything up quickly and leave before the sun came up. At once, the vampires rushed forward together. The charging vampires leaped through the air, but the corrupted cut straight through one of them and continued slashing through the rest without slowing down. He carved through another vampire's head, then immediately cut down more enemies one after another with swift, precise strikes. Watching the battle, Hyunku wondered what was wrong with this guy. He questioned whether this corrupted had not even been ready for the finishing blow yet. The corrupted continued cutting through the remaining vampires as their bodies fell across the road. A vampire lunged at him, but before it could reach him, a gunshot tore through its head and sent it crashing to the ground. Sigun lowered his smoking pistol and remarked that he had not expected to meet Hyunku again like this. He added that it had been a long time. He looked around and noted that Songdok had not arrived yet. The corrupted recognized the newcomer and addressed him as Sagan. Hyunku tried to run from there. Sagan pointed his gun at Hyunku and stopped him, asking where he thought he was going. He pulled the trigger, and the bullet tore through Hyunku's leg. He screamed in pain and collapsed while clutching his wound. After staring at Sagan for a moment, the corrupted quietly turned away and walked past him. Hyunku watched in disbelief and wondered why the corrupted had ignored Sagan instead of attacking him. Sagan walked up to Hyunku and asked if he was Cheon Hyunku. He then wondered whether they even knew what the Sangdong gang had done to him. Sagan said there was no point in talking about it anymore. As he looked at the bodies around him, he reflected that none of it mattered now. After all, he could never return to the life he once had. He thanked Chun Hyunkora for the learning experience and raised his gun. Despite Chun Hyunkora begging him to stop, Sagan pulled the trigger. As Hyunkora died, Sagan remembered that he should never have meddled in something that did not concern him. Meanwhile, under the moonlight, inside an underground tunnel, the corrupted was resting there. Songdok came and remarked that he owed that brat a debt. He recognized the corrupted. Captain Jung and the corrupted, or say Captain Jong, weakly tried to call out to Song before groaning in pain. Songdok lowered his weapon as the corrupted. Captain Jong staggered before suddenly charging forward with glowing red eyes. Songdok fired a bullet that directly hit at Captain Jong's arm. Watching the scene, Songdok remarked that it seemed vampires were not the only ones incapable of shedding tears. Suddenly, a memory surfaced in Captain Jong's mind. He saw himself sitting at home in his military uniform with his family. His son asked when he would come home that day, and hoped he could return early so they could all go out to eat together. Captain Jong quietly agreed, and the child happily said he would love that. Later, the memory abruptly turned into a nightmare. The smiling child became covered in blood, and Captain Jong saw the lifeless bodies of his wife and son lying before him. Flames raged around him while soldiers rushed through the burning streets, but all he could do was cry in despair. Back at the present, Songdok watched in disbelief and complained that the situation was complete nonsense. He questioned what kind of absurdity this was as Captain Jong remained frozen instead of fighting. Songdok shouted at the corrupted Captain Jong, telling him to stop standing around and at least try to attack. Captain Jong glared at him, and Songdok admitted that he hesitated because of lingering emotions. He called himself a complete failure as a teacher. While Captain Jong groaned in pain, Songdok said that his head hurt and told the corrupted to be quiet. Songdok then said there was no way to go back anymore. Later, the scene shifted to outside. Sigun and Sylvester approached the scene, and Sigun asked if Songdok had really taken the target down. Sylvester asked Songdok whether he was going to collect the bounty. Songdok answered that he would take it on behalf of both himself and the deceased, adding that since Captain Jong had no family left, he would simply consider it his inheritance. Sigun noticed the synthesized serum and expressed his surprise, but Sylvester warned him not to overstep his boundaries. Hambin reflected that, beneath the moonlight, everyone had their own way of staying sane. The incident would reveal the true nature of the corrupted to the world, and warned people never to underestimate the corrupted. He explained that manipulating humans and keeping them silent was child's play for the children of Tetra-Anax. As a crow with glowing red eyes flew overhead, the scene shifted to a luxurious room where Wilhelm reported that most of the cleanup was complete. He added that the media had been silenced as instructed, but asked if everything would be all right. Phantom calmly replied that it could not be helped. Even if the situation had not turned out exactly as they had hoped, they had done everything they could, and Tetra Anax would not press the issue any further. Wilhelm remarked that losing his family simply because they had caught someone's attention was already tragic enough. He added that it was cruel for a corrupted hunter to end up with a bounty on his own head and be hunted down himself. Phantom replied that such cruelty was simply the way of Tetra Anax. Phantom then explained that Tetra Anax was the true king of the corrupted, a being capable of controlling humans through telepathy while also possessing the power of foresight. He said that the reason their kind had been able to live among human society for thousands of years was partly because of Tetra Anax's protection. Wilhelm quietly acknowledged the explanation, while Phantom remarked that it was better to at least pretend to be submissive. He added that, without doing so, they might have ended up just like the Jokyo clan. Wilhelm dismissed the thought as unsettling, and Phantom agreed. He then warned that it was better not to place faith in baseless optimism, because their current paradoxical peace would not last forever. The scene later shifted to a snowy harbor at night. Kenneth shivered in the freezing cold and complained that, although it was winter, the weather near the ocean should have been a little warmer. He grumbled that he would freeze to death from the cold before any corrupted could suck his blood dry. Still shivering, he made his way through the snow toward a warehouse. After checking his pistol, Kenneth cautiously entered the building while remaining hidden behind the shelves. Seeing several people already inside, he sarcastically wondered whether he had become a little too popular, then questioned why they had arrived before opening hours if they were only there to buy supplies. Kenneth quietly aimed his gun from behind cover, believing that such an intimidating first impression would only make it harder for him to negotiate a fair price. Before he could act, a long-haired man noticed him and casually greeted him. Startled, Kenneth recognized him as Sehek. Sehek remarked that Kenneth had accumulated an impressive stockpile of high-quality equipment and commented that he must have been working hard. As Kenneth wondered when Sehek had returned to Korea, Sehek explained that Kenneth's hard work selling weapons to the corrupted had led to the deaths of many of his comrades. He added that Kenneth had supplied them with not only weapons, but also bulletproof vests and countless other pieces of equipment. Sehek then raised a knife, making it clear that he intended to settle the matter himself. Sehek declared that the losses were far too great, so someone had to pay the price. Kenneth nervously tried to explain that there had been a misunderstanding, but Sehek dismissed the excuse without hesitation. Grabbing Kenneth, Sehek remarked that human history had always been filled with misunderstanding and hostility. Sehek replied that he was willing to remain misunderstood if that was the cost, and from here the arc of the alchemist starts. Pressing the knife against Kenneth's face, he coldly told him to stop talking. After beating Kenneth, Sehek admitted that he would normally have killed Kenneth on the spot. However, he explained that he planned to settle down in Korea for a while, and there was still one thing he needed. As Kenneth struggled on the floor, Sehek pointed out that, no matter where he looked, Kenneth was still the only reliable gun supplier in the country. With that in mind, he decided that Kenneth's life still had some value. Sehek explained that he had come in person to strengthen their friendship. Then he made a single request, telling Kenneth to stop all business with vampires from that moment onward. Kenneth admitted that would be difficult because the vampires were his biggest customers, but before he could finish speaking, Sehek kicked him away without mercy. Kenneth was sent crashing across the warehouse, while Sehek remarked that this stubbornness was becoming troublesome. Lighting a cigarette, Sehek commented that he was not fond of playing hard to get. After taking a drag, he praised the taste of a lucky strike and casually asked Kenneth if he agreed. Kenneth weakly replied that he did not know and had never found anything special about it. Sehek admitted that he had expected a different answer, then brushed it aside. He explained that one of his companions had been seriously injured because of deck, so he was now looking to rebuild his group's strength. With that in mind, he asked Kenneth if he knew any capable hunters who could be recruited. Kenneth asked what kind of hunter Sehek had in mind. Sehek mentioned that he had heard the true ancestor hunter, Father Sylvester, was in Korea, and suggested that Kenneth introduce them. Kenneth stared at him in disbelief, and asked if he had lost his mind, reminding him that Father Sylvester was an extraordinary monster. Sehek calmly replied that being called insane was flattering, claiming he had very high standards. He pointed to the lit cigarette in his hand, and joked that he was even practicing fire prevention before pressing the burning tip against Kenneth. As Kenneth cried out in pain, Sehek casually remarked that a struggling student could survive after losing a few cigarettes, so Kenneth could endure this much as well. He then repeated that Kenneth only needed to tell him where Sylvester was, and he would handle everything else himself. Kenneth groaned in pain, but Sehek suggested that writing the information in a notebook or on a phone would be much faster. Unable to bear any more torture, Kenneth finally gave in and begged him to stop, agreeing to cooperate. Sehek remarked that Kenneth's change of heart had come rather suddenly, and mocked him for being a man with weak convictions. The scene then shifted to the exterior of Seonghu's cafe. The cafe staff quietly worked as usual with Seonghu until the entrance door opened. Sehek walked inside with several people following behind him, immediately drawing everyone's attention. He looked around the cafe before turning towards Seonghu. Seonghu gestured the cafe employee to go hide herself. The other employee quietly stepped away. Sehek approached the counter, greeted her politely, and introduced himself by handing over a business card. After reading the card, Sung-Hui recognized him as Mr. Sahyuk and calmly asked what business had brought him there. Sahyuk casually replied that he had only come to enjoy a delicious cup of coffee. Sung-Hui immediately asked if he had actually come looking for Father Sylvester. Sahyuk admitted that she had seen through his intentions too easily. Sung-Hui then asked whether he was a vampire hunter. She pointed out that entering the cafe in the middle of the day with hidden weapons and a large group behind him was hardly subtle and would only disturb the business. The people accompanying Sahyuk remained seated and waited while the conversation continued. Sahyuk casually raised his hand to gesture them to relax and remarked that such concerns were probably a matter of Eastern courtesy. Segan was seating there in a hoodie. Sahyuk then turned his attention to Segan and said that he had recently been searching for capable people, believing someone of Segan's caliber was rare to find. He pulled out a chair, offered him a seat, and proposed that they work together with generous treatment. Segan asked if Sahyuk wanted him to join his little gang. Sahyuk replied that it was not a gang but a job offer. He explained that when people with the same goal work together, they could achieve unimaginable results. He added that the work came with a standard benefits package, including a base salary and performance incentives. When Segan showed interest, Sahyuk continued by explaining that his organization owned stabilization devices, VT measuring equipment, and even psychedelic moon extraction devices. He further stated that they controlled their own distribution channels, allowing anything obtained during a hunt to be sold immediately without relying on brokers. Because of that, hunters would not have to lose a share of their profits to middlemen, something Segan understood better than anyone. Sahyuk smiled faintly and continued, saying that above all else, there was another important advantage. He stayed close to Segan and continued praising the organization's exceptional welfare facilities and employee benefits. After finishing his explanation, he once again invited Segan to join them. Segan calmly declined the offer, thanking Sahyuk before making it clear that he had no intention of joining. A faint smile spread across Sahyuk's face as he remarked that Segan would regret refusing. At that moment, another man stepped forward and demanded to know who they were. Sahyuk recognized the newcomer as the true ancestor hunter, Sylvester. He admitted that he had heard Sylvester's name many times but had expected someone much older. Sylvester interrupted him, telling him to stop talking, keep it brief, and shut his filthy mouth because he reeked of rot. Sahyuk tried to explain that he had actually intended to recruit Sylvester as well, but Sylvester immediately rejected the offer and ordered him to leave. Sahyuk attempted to continue speaking and asked Sylvester to let him finish, but before he could complete his sentence, Sylvester pressed a gun against his forehead, stopping him in place. In an instant, people with Sahyuk aimed their guns at Sylvester, while Sylvester kept his own gun pressed against Sahyuk's forehead. Unfazed, Sylvester remarked that Sahyuk had run away to Korea yet still had not learned his place. Mentioning him as alchemist, Sahyuk says that, since Sylvester hunted true ancestors, he should at least hear their proposal before making a decision. He added that they both have the same goal. Sylvester kept his gun trained on Sahyuk and dismissed the proposal, stating that they were businessmen, and that fact alone made the negotiation a failure. Sahyuk paused for a moment before suddenly laughing. He apologized for the intrusion and announced that they would take their leave. Sahyuk and his group walks away. Later on that night, when the cafe employee leaves the cafe, watching the situation, Sung-Hui thought that things had become complicated and found it surprising that Sahyuk had actually entered Korea. Sagan asked Sylvester whether he knew Sahyuk. Sylvester confirmed that people called him the Alchemist, and Sagan remarked that Sahyuk even had a nickname, then wondered what the nickname Alchemist meant. Sylvester calmly drank from his cup and told him that, if he was curious, he should ask Sahyuk himself. Well, when Sylvester ignores Sung-Hui answers the question, she explained that Sahyuk was different from other hunters. He supplied blood, personally manufactured psychedelic moon, handled its distribution, and operated with a group, meaning the amount they produced had to be enormous, and this was exactly why Sahyuk was known as the Alchemist. Sagan realized Sahyuk had not been bluffing with the proposal from earlier. Sung-Hui mentioned that Sahyuk had mainly operated in the United States, so seeing him appear in Korea meant the rumors about the market price collapsing were probably true. Sylvester agreed and believed that person was behind it. Sung-Hui remarked that, regardless of his methods, Sahyuk was considered a man known as the pinnacle in the world of vampire hunters, though not quite on Sylvie's level. Sylvester immediately told Sung-Hui to stop calling him Sylvie. Sagan wondered whether it would be better to at least stay on speaking terms with someone as influential as Sahyuk. He also pointed out that Tetra Anax had started watching them, so stronger cooperation between hunters seemed like the best option. Sylvester immediately rejected the idea. He said that even if Sagan had good intentions, he had chosen the wrong target. In Sylvester's view, Sahyuk was not sane. Sagan asked whether anyone in their line of work could really be considered sane. After saying that, he stood up to leave. When Sylvester asked where he was going, Sagan quietly questioned whether he himself was even sane anymore. After Sagan left, Sung-Hui wondered if they should have stopped him. She reminded Sylvester that they needed to be careful, especially after what had happened to Young Jun. Meanwhile, Sahyuk sat inside a vehicle, smoking a cigarette. He reflected that being insulted like that only proved Sylvester truly lived up to the reputation of a genuine ancestor hunter. The driver asked Sahyuk whether they should eliminate Sylvester. Sahyuk immediately questioned how they were supposed to kill a monster who hunted true ancestors all by himself. After a brief silence, he dismissed the idea, saying there were simply some people who should never be made into enemies. When the driver brought up the green-haired young man from the cafe, Sahyuk told him to leave the boy alone for now. He explained that although the young man looked young, he had an unusual presence. Even while an adult was speaking directly to him, he barely reacted and simply kept yawning. The driver wondered if that was just rude behavior. Sahyuk laughed and admitted it might have seemed that way, but he believed the boy had been sizing them up instead. In his view, the young man had probably been judging how many of them he could handle if a fight broke out, which Sahyuk found amusing. As he reflected on the encounter, Sahyuk remarked that the young man carried the scent of blood, just like he did. Thinking about it only made Sahyuk want him even more. Sahyuk wondered if fate is in their side. Will they again have any beautiful encounter? The driver asked whether he should track Sagan's movements if fate was going to bring them together again. Sahyuk laughed and remarked that the driver had quite a talent for business. Elsewhere, Sagan sat alone under the moonlight. He checked the business card given by Sahyuk and noticed that the phone number had no caller ID, making him wonder if the email address had only been printed for appearance's sake. As he looked over the city, he reflected that he had once believed things were different. He had a weapon, he had been trained, and he thought he could stop the monsters and protect everyone. But those beliefs had been shattered. His thoughts eventually returned to the memory of the beautiful girl Jin Yu Mi, leaving him silently staring into the distance. Segan quietly recalled how he had introduced himself as Han Segun to Yumi. The memory faded as he stood outside a building, where he suddenly sensed an unusual presence. He checked his necklace that suddenly starts glowing. Kyung was watching Segun and casually remarks that Segun's necklace looked valuable. Realizing Kyung was a vampire, Segun immediately drew his gun. As soon as he fired, he regretted not attaching a silencer, knowing the noise would attract attention. Kyung effortlessly avoided the attack and commented that Segun had good combat instincts for a human. He rushed forward at incredible speed, forcing Segun into close combat as the two clashed head-on. Kyung's powerful kick came crashing towards Segun, and Segun realized he couldn't stop the attack in time. He raised his arms and blocked it, but the overwhelming force still sent him flying across the street. Kyung remarked that humans hunted vampires just as vampires hunted humans, adding that Segun should have realized by now that vampires could hunt humans as well. Believing he had gained the upper hand, Kyung declared that Segun was far too naive and launched another crushing kick. However, the moment his attack landed, he paused in surprise. Segun had caught Kyung's leg with both hands. Calmly, Kyung asked if Segun had managed to eat something during the fight. Using the opening, Segun hurled Kyung away. Kyung landed on the ground with a grunt before admitting that the fight would not be enjoyable if Segun were defeated so easily. As the distance between them grew, Segun realized that this opponent felt completely different from every enemy he had faced before. Knowing he could not win through a direct confrontation, he decided that escaping had to come first. Kyung suddenly appeared behind Segun and asked if he had enjoyed his jog. Before Segun could react, Kyung rushed in and launched a series of attacks. Segun avoided the strikes and remarked that Kyung should use his turn signal before cutting in. He immediately countered by grabbing Kyung, flipping him over his shoulder, and slamming him onto the ground. The two separated and charged at each other again. Kyung acknowledged that Segun had some impressive moves. Even though Segun had taken Psychedelic Moon, he realized that none of his attacks were landing at all. Segun remembered how he declared that those bastards deserved to die whether it was profitable or not. The longer a vampire stayed alive, the more they spread like a plague. Segun thinks that he had acted so confidently, only to end up in such a pathetic state. He blocked another attack as the fight continued. Kyung admitted that Segun fought better than expected, but before he could finish, Segun tried to strike back. Kyung landed a heavy blow that sent Segun crashing to the ground. He criticized Segun for being far too sloppy to be called the disciple of the true ancestor hunter. As Segun lay on the ground, Kyung told him that before he died, it was only polite to let him know who was killing him. He introduced himself as Kyung, of the Hall of Silence. Kyung stood over Segun while keeping him pinned beneath his foot. Segun coughed and remarked that he is actually not planning to die. Kyung considered Wilhelm's request, but remarked that killing Segun seemed boring and brought him no profit. Instead, he offered Segun another choice and asked how about being born again. As Segun lay on the ground, Kyung admitted that he hated praising himself, but even within the Hall of Silence, he ranked among the top 10 in VT. He told Segun that if he accepted, he would be reborn as a true walker of the moonlight. In Zmanbaning Songduk's warning never to become a vampire, Songduk declared that he did not care whether he had raised Segun or not, and would not go easy on him if he became one. Segun began explaining that telling a hunter to become the prey is such a foolish idea. Kyung looked shocked as Segun asked if Kyung's brain had rotted after sucking a little blood. Kyung grabbed Segun by the head and cursed that Segun had remained cocky until the very end. Before anything else happened, another voice interrupted and asked what was going on there. Kyung immediately noticed the newcomer and turned toward the source of the voice. The man himself, the alchemist Sahyuk, arrived and says that after hearing gunshots he came to see what was happening because things were getting interesting. Kyung asked who he was, and Sahyuk replied that being called by his name, Sahyuk, would be better than a cold greeting. Sahyuk calmly offered Kyung a deal. If Kyung left Saegun alone and walked away immediately, he would let him go without pursuing him any further that day, calling it a win-win situation. When Kyung refused, Sahyuk remarked that it was unfortunate for both of them because he would now have to ask for Kyung's contribution to help his business prosper. Kyung recognized Sahyuk as the alchemist and mocked him for talking big after fleeing from America. He immediately launched a powerful attack, but Sahyuk blocked it with ease. Realizing his attack had been stopped, Kyung was momentarily surprised. Sahyuk commented that Kyung had not taken him seriously, then lit a cigarette and remarked that he preferred friends who thought about the long term, because it was not a full moon. Otherwise, he claimed Kyung's head would have been flown off just now. Even so, Kyung admitted to himself that the rumors were true and that Sahyuk was far from an ordinary opponent. Kyung suddenly dashed forward and struck injured Saegun with enough force to make him cough up blood, then proposed a new deal. He declared that the winner of their fight would take Saegun, calling it a simple arrangement. Sahyuk burst into laughter and mocked Kyung's proposal. He sarcastically called him a friend with better judgment than Solomon. Kyung scoffed that someone who had only lived for a few decades had no right to speak so confidently, declaring that he was old enough to be Sahyuk's great-great-grandfather. Well, technically this was right. When Kyung launched his attack, Sahyuk narrowly avoided the attack, and the two immediately exchanged a rapid series of blows, with neither side gaining a clear advantage as their high-speed battle continued. Kyung could hardly believe what he was seeing. He realized that a mere human who had not even used psychedelic moon was matching his strength. The only explanation he could think of was that Sahyuk's mastery of Chinese martial arts had reached an extraordinary level. Without slowing down, Sahyuk landed a heavy punch and casually asked if Kyung liked that. Even then, Kyung realized Sahyuk had not revealed his full strength yet. Sahyuk joked that he had simply watched plenty of John Wick movies, only for Kyung to angrily snap that John Wick was capable of killing people with only pen. Their fight intensified as powerful shockwaves burst from every exchange, sending both of them racing across the battlefield. After another high-speed clash, Sahyuk smiled and remarked that Kyung had become faster, acknowledging that his opponent was gradually raising the pace of the battle. Kyung's severed arm suddenly transformed into a grotesque mass of flesh before regenerating, and he mocked Sahyuk by asking if he thought that was all he had. A massive blast of energy erupted from the regenerated arm and struck Sahyuk directly. Laughing, Kyung asked how that attack tasted. Sahyuk admitted he had expected them to settle the fight with their fists like men, then wondered if he had expected too much. Looking at the restored damage, Kyung immediately questioned how Sahyuk had managed to survive. Sahyuk calmly revealed a hidden handgun and explained that, when it came to using techniques, he had a few of his own. He instantly fired several shots, and the bullets tore through Kyung's body, making him cry out in pain. As another attack approached, Kyung looked up in shock while a blazing explosion engulfed the area around him. When the smoke began to clear, Sahyuk remained standing and remarked that, unfortunately, he had not brought his blood extraction device. With that attack, Kyung was already on his knees. Carrying Saegun, Sahyuk coldly told Kyung to consider himself lucky. Kyung struggled to his feet, stared at Sahyuk in disbelief, and demanded to know what kind of monster he was. In frustration, he cursed at him and asked who he really was. Sahyuk casually answered that he was a teddy bear because he preferred bears over dogs, then turned his back and walked away, leaving Kyung behind. Sahyuk's driver was waiting nearby, and as Sahyuk approached, he ordered his subordinate to open the trunk because they were taking someone with them. After everyone got into the vehicle, the driver asked why they had left Kyung behind instead of extracting his blood. Sahyuk explained that a businessman could not succeed by chasing every small opportunity in front of him. While lighting a cigarette, he added that the Jukyo clan still had their esquires alive. Sahyuk says that catching a big fish required using top-class bait. Later, the scene shifted. Sahyuk explained that Saechan's wounds had healed unusually fast, likely because they had injected him with high-quality vampire blood. When Saegun asked where he was, Sahyuk answered that anyone doing business in Korea needed a proper office. After a while, the two introduced themselves properly by shaking hands. Saegun gave his name, and Sahyuk introduced himself in return. Saegun thanked him for saving his life, but Sahyuk dismissed the gratitude, saying it was only natural for fellow hunters to help each other. Sahyuk then remarked that Saegun's fight against the Jokyo clan member had been impressive. He pointed out that even though the Jokyo clan had fallen from power, their opponent had still been a major figure. Saegun wondered what Sahyuk had seen in him since he had only been beaten badly. Sahyuk then renewed the offer he had previously made at the cafe, explaining that his organization was short-staffed and urgently needed another capable member. As Sejan remained silent, one of Sahyuk's subordinates objected, reminding him that they still did not even know Sejan's true identity. Sahyuk asks, why did a hunter even need an identity? And with this, we've come to the end of today's episode. If you stayed till the last second, drop your thoughts about this story, and in the comments, guess what our MC will do next. A quick like helps more than you think, and subscribing makes sure you never miss what comes next. Thank you for watching, and check out this video right here.